So the clock on the wall says 6, so it's time to come to order. And we have a nice evening, perhaps long evening, with Jason. So go for it, Jason. Oh, I'm sorry, I want a roll call first.
Kirk Collins, City Council.
Gordon Langenbecker, lay member.
Josh Ballack, lay member.
Rob Pell, City Council.
Trip Androy, lay member.
Linda Barkey, lay member.
Tom Bradbeer, lay member.
Tom Brandis, lay member.
Aaron Gubick, budget officer.
J.C. Rowley, finance director.
Tammy Schmidt, lay member.
Joel King, City Council.
Excellent. And we have a few people online.
Rick Riker, City Council.
Sorry, Rick. Vanessa O'Shea, City Council.
And Jason is not online just yet, but I will let you know if he gets online.
Okay. Now,
And Jason Kennedy, Public Works Director.
excellent.
So with that, Chair, I put a packet in front of all of your workstations. It's pared down as far as I could get it, so we're gonna move pretty quickly. I'm gonna get through each division, and hopefully we can take questions on each division at that time and then move on to the next division, as opposed to trying to get through all of them and remembering what I said about the first one. The other thing is we have capital projects tonight. So one of the primary duties of Public Works is we do a lot of capital projects. So at the end of each division, I am gonna go through the capital projects for that division. Because there are so many, I'm going to talk about each project. I'll kind of glance around. If you have a question, please raise your hand. If I don't see anything in a few seconds, I'm going to kind of just keep moving to keep the pace going, because there are 200 slides to get through tonight. So we're going to try and keep this moving at a pretty good clip. And we got to get control back to the PowerPoint. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about department organization, as well as review each department and division. We include transportation, stormwater, water, wastewater, solid waste, public works administration, engineering services, facilities management, and fleet services in the public works division. So all of the slides we'll show are going to refer you to the budget pages. We are going to show you screenshots of the exact pages and refer you to the pages. Those will show the previous 2 years of actual data, in addition to the current fiscal year recommended and the recommended budget for 23 and a projected 24. So I already covered this a little bit, but capital projects are a large part of what we do. This presentation covers any new capital project. So any project that's added to the capital program will be included, and any capital project that's receiving additional funds of $50,000 or more. We will include the project description, the anticipated budget, any funding source or sources, and any ongoing costs for your consideration. And again, we will direct you to the exact page. The other thing I'm going to be doing is bouncing back and forth between the budget books, so I'll try to tell you when I'm switching, so that when I give you the page number, it's in the correct book. So organizational structure. The Public Works Department has been in transition for pretty much the last 5 years. With the addition of multiple departments, we've also been working on internally restructuring to be able to better provide service to both our external and internal customers. We are now comprised, as I said, of water, wastewater, streets, stormwater, fleet, facilities, engineering, GIS, solid waste, which is not on that list, and public works administration. That's comprised of 58.5 full-time employees. You're wondering how we got a half. We actually share half of the urban forester with the Parks Division. And just under 12,000 hours of temporary and seasonal hours. And you can see our structure. I tend to cover all of the wet utilities, water, wastewater, fleet, some of the others. Wade takes care of the transportation and stormwater and our capital program, and does a great job with it too. So with no further ado, we're going to launch right in with transportation. That is in your large budget book, and we're on pages 170 to 183. So the transportation department is responsible for the maintenance of all vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian systems. That includes surface repairs, including overlays, sign fabrication and installation, curb, gutter, sidewalk repairs, right-of-way vegetation control, although this is a task that we do share with our Parks Division, and community development, our street lighting program, and we are recommending that we have 2.8 FTEs, which is down from 3.75. Now that looks like a big shift. Before, transportation was transportation/stormwater. They were a joint division. What we're doing, they're all still working back and forth doing the same work, but we're reallocating those people to where they're spending the bulk of their time. Most of the transportation work that we do is managing contracts. They're not actually out there digging up the streets and putting down new asphalt. They're managing a contract for somebody to dig that street up and put down asphalt. So we're just lowering the FTE allocation, and we're reflecting, you're going to see the corresponding increase on the stormwater side, which is where we actually have the guys out in the field doing the physical work. So looking at the overall program, the budget is showing an overall increase of $3.365 million, which sounds like a huge, huge number. But if you look, almost all of that is in our capital program, and we carry quite a bit of reserves. We've got a lot of capital projects that we're doing, and so that's why those numbers look so large. When we look at the streets and drainage program just itself, we're seeing a $20,000 decrease, and that's really largely due to that reallocation of personnel. Diving into the transportation budget a little bit more specifically, we can look at the revenues. You're kind of seeing a swing in the increase with the beginning balances starting to come up. This reflects unspent revenues that are generated back and put into the fund balance. Our gas tax, we're kind of holding flat, even though it's down slightly. These are based on numbers that we receive from ODOT, and they're a combination of population and revenue split from the state. We run those numbers. They generally come in fairly close to on target. Yeah.
Sorry, is the gas tax a percentage of the gas tax, or is it a fixed fee?
It is a fee per population, and so I don't know how the exact ratio is calculated from ODOT, but what they have is a fixed value per your registered population, or your population from Portland State, which fluctuates up and down. They publish a document every year that says Grants Pass is going to receive this, but it's based on this allocation. Interest is trending down, just we've not had very good luck with that at the moment. I know you guys had a conversation about that on, I think, night one, so that probably will be a topic for future discussion. Permit fees were trending upwards. Transportation fees, these are from the transportation utility fees, which are on the utility bill. We're increasing that slightly. And then other revenue, we just don't receive any in the transportation department. And then largely you can see where the bulk of the funds are is all in our capital construction program, which is up significantly, which is great because that means that we're out there getting work done on the streets. So where the work gets done, this is where all of our personnel are allocated. You can see that between 22 and 23, with the reallocation of the personnel, we're down $66,000 in the program. Everything else kind of trends a little bit up, materials and supplies. So some of the work that they do, some of the work that they perform does require significantly expensive materials. When we crack seal, that's an oil-based product. Oil products right now are not coming inexpensively if you can obtain them. So crack sealing program may be on hold this year as we look at that. And then our contractual and professional services, and these are like the vehicles, power, utilities, are trended up a little bit for an overall decrease of $20,000 for the program. So again, just to reiterate the major adjustments, we're down in personnel, but that is strictly because of reallocations. Materials are reasonably flat, but up slightly, and it just really is adjusting to meet the demand when we do that year to year. Contractual is up as we move vehicles around, and we are purchasing a new Vector truck, which is shared with the Stormwater division, so you'll see that one again. And then the big one is our street lighting department. We did a major project 2 years ago now, and we're finally seeing the outcomes of that. Our street lighting bill is down $100,000 a year from switching from incandescent to all LEDs. It is an incredibly successful program. We've got a few complaints, but most of those we've been able to put hoods on, just the change in lighting. And I think most of those complaints were that the lights that were in place were so old and so dim that had we just replaced them with an actual wattage of incandescent bulb, we probably would have gotten the same complaint. But when you go and change them all out to LED at one time, there have been some complaints. We still get about 2 a year. It's gone way down, and we get a hood put on, but the money that we've saved is incredible. $100,000 a year on street lighting is pretty amazing, and we have a much higher quality light in the streets for safety.
Did the Energy Trust of Oregon help with that project?
They did. We were actually very lucky because we caught the tail end of the incentives on that. They were, woo, can I have a paper towel? That almost was a disaster. We did catch the tail end of the incentives on that program, and they were able to fund almost the entire project. I think we paid about $80,000. The rest was funded by the Energy Trust a few years ago. So transportation very much is a personnel-driven program. So you can see that 37% of our budget is personnel. The rest is contractual. It is hiring folks to do the work. That's our street lighting. There's almost 200,000. Thank you. That could have been a disaster early. The rest is kind of in our materials and supplies. Thank you, Wade. So moving on to capital. We're going to go through the projects. We are now in the thinner capital book. And we're going to start out with project TR6243 on page 21 of the capital book. And this is Fruitdale Drive. This is a project that has been on the books now for quite some time, in fact, since 2017. It will eventually pay for the design and construction of Fruitdale Drive from Rogue River Highway to Williams Highway and increase safety and capacity. This is another real tricky road. It has buildings up to the edge. It also is a county road. This is not a city street. At some point, we will be discussing with the county how to partner on this project so that they have some stake in helping us to upgrade it. We're estimating about a $10 million project, but this may or may not increase or decrease as grant funds become available. This road has lost some of its effectiveness. And the reason that I'm going to say that now is this is one of the things we'll be analyzing as we move forward. When ODOT made changes right at just past the South Y, where Fruitdale ties into 238, and you used to be able to cross there, and it actually was a connector which got you over to 238. When we lost that connection, which was very much needed, don't get me wrong, because there were accidents there probably one a month or more frequently, this road doesn't now function quite as it was intended to do. So we'll want to reevaluate that moving forward, but we do want to start putting money aside because this is one that's going to take quite a bit of time to build up reserves to construct. It is still in the transportation system plan and still does provide needed access for all of the folks in that area. Okay.
Questions?
Next project, TR6247. This is page 22. This is a newer project. Brought around, I think last year we brought this one forward, Wade, does that sound right? 2 years ago. The project is going to evaluate and install improvements to possibly relocate a railroad crossing at Endemic from Booth. We are thinking of $200,000 in gas tax. Total project cost is going to be probably around $1 million. Future and ongoing costs are yet to be determined. North and south, Endemic provides a very, very important connector on this side of town. And right now, you cannot get all the way north and south unless you're on 6th. This connector really will help with that. But we have to add another railroad crossing. Adding railroad crossings are difficult. And likely we're gonna have to take the one out at Booth and close Booth to through traffic and move it over to Endemic to get that traffic north and south. I'm looking at it, if nobody waves their hand, I'm gonna keep going if you're okay with that, Chair. Okay, thank you. TR 6333, a lot of threes on that one. This is Josephine County Transit Operating Grant. This is the second version of this. I think we closed the previous one and reopened it. It's on page 23 of your capital. This is strictly a pass-through account with some gas tax revenue from grants passed serving as the match, and helps Josephine Community Transit out with their operating costs. So it is a $137,000 federal grant with $16,000 worth of grants passed as gas tax. Okay. And then where the work actually starts to get done. TR 6372, overlay maintenance, page 26. This project identifies and resurfaces streets as part of ongoing maintenance of our transportation system. We're recommending an additional funding allocation of $600,000 worth of gas tax. Total project cost is probably $2.5 million, but it really is larger than that. That's just, we can go overlay streets forever. Ongoing costs are normal and routine maintenance. We really get a lot of value out of our overlay program. I mean, Wade can really speak to it, but when we go in and overlay a street or do a grind on an overlay, we extend the life of that street dramatically, whereas if we let it go too far to failure, we're then looking at a complete rebuild, which costs us millions of dollars instead of tens of thousands. So we try to get out there and overlay multiple street segments every year. It's a great program, good bang for our buck. TR 6373, this is a bike pedestrian river crossing, and it is on page 27 of your capital book. This is going to identify an area for a potential bike and pedestrian crossing, again, to try and create a more, another convenient north-south passage to get folks more inclined to commute via bicycle. We're adding and we're recommending the addition of $100,000 from the Bikeway Fund. Estimated total project is unknown. This is really just to start really studying where we can put this. We would like it to go somewhere around the 5th Street area. We're going to probably start the conversations with ODOT to see what impediments there may be with it being so close to the 5th Street Bridge, or 6th Street Bridge, excuse me. But that would be a very convenient north-south corridor for bikes. Yeah.
Sorry, so I was just looking at the outlay here. It's not going to be $800,000 for the study. It's just you're putting money away to be able to pay for the full project, right?
Yeah, it could be more than that. It could end up being $1 million by the time you build the bridge. No, we're just going to get that started with about $100,000. The study should be, I don't even know, less than 100. Yeah. This is one that we looked at on the tour today. So this is TR 6384, Hillcrest Drive improvements. This is going to be a great project. It's going to completely upgrade Hillcrest Drive from 9th to Beacon Drive. And as you can see, this one is getting money from all over the place. We're recommending $1 million in gas tax revenue, in addition to $100,000 worth of transportation SDCs, $150,000 for the Water Operations Fund, $75,000 from Wastewater Operations Fund, and $100,000 from Stormwater SDCs. We're estimating total project costs of about $4.3 million, with ongoing costs of just design, acquisition of right-of-way and construction, in addition to ongoing maintenance of the street. This project will install quite a bit of water and sewer, which is why they are contributing. In addition, we will be making major stormwater upgrades in this area. But a great project. Actually, they're all great projects. I say that, but they are. So now we're into our new projects. This is TR 6425, and it's a study. It is a multimodal transportation system refinement study, which is a big word to say, let's figure out how to move people around without them driving through town. It was a high priority for the Bikeway Fund and also was adopted into, I believe, the strategic plan this year as one of their priority goals. That we are asking for $50,000 for the Bikeway Fund and an additional $50,000 of gas tax revenue to get that study started and look at projects that will help get more access, easier access to bike and trail systems within Grants Pass. Excellent. This is another project that we looked at on the tour today. This is TR 6426, and this is the potential to install a roundabout at the corners of Foothill and Agnes. This is a very heavily used intersection with multiple lanes of traffic. It is in some dire need of some major urgent repairs, which we are going to make with the allocation from this project, but also we will be funding a study with this project to evaluate whether or not a roundabout is a better use of this area. Right now, there are adjacent properties that would allow it to be constructed here. It's not completely built out. We're not going to be tearing down a lot of structures, in other words. We do believe that this is a good location for it with the amount of traffic and lanes that it receives, because traffic would then be able to just smoothly flow around that roundabout. But that's going to require some study. Excellent. TR 6427, Sidewalk Infill and Repair Fund. These are some of our ongoing projects that we have. This is on page 33 of your capital. This is where we help to infill sidewalks. There's just small segments that are missing in places, and it doesn't make sense where they're not around a developed piece of property, or it's just easier for us if we're in the area doing another drainage project or a water service where we use these funds to go in and do the infill. We're asking for $50,000 in gas tax revenues, and this is part of our whole 50-50 sidewalk repair program as well, where you as a homeowner who has a hazardous sidewalk can come to us and say, I have a hazardous sidewalk, and you can apply with your quotes and get that run through planning, and the city will help to fund that sidewalk repair. It's been a very successful program, and it helps us to get hazardous sections of sidewalk repaired throughout the community. Okay. Next big one. This is a big one. This is TR 6432, and this is the fourth bridge refinement study. So one of the projects we looked at was Redwood Highway, Redwood Avenue, the potential for adding a slip lane on Redwood Highway, which would lead into Redwood Avenue, but we still really need that fourth bridge to get across the river. So these funds will be dedicated to doing an in-depth study of where that fourth bridge needs to go and the feasibility of being able to construct it at that location. We are asking for $400,000 allocation of gas tax revenue. Total project cost to complete an entire study we estimate is going to be about $1 million. The studies for major transportation projects are very expensive because you have to do a lot of the environmental work up front, including siting, property acquisition constraints. It's pretty involved. So after the preliminary design, the full design will be required along with funding and construction. So there are quite a bit of future costs for this project. You will not be building a bridge for $1 million. It will be pretty extensive.
Karen.
Rick has a question.
Yep.
Jason, on that, does any of that review include relooking at the location and making sure that still works?
It does, Councilor Riker. That's one of the primary functions of this study, not only to evaluate the location as we showed you, I want to say last week, could have been a little bit earlier. We did look at 4 locations pretty extensively, but we will re-look at that to make sure that when we do place this bridge, it is in the right location to do the most benefit.
Thank you.
Jason, And if the fourth bridge is built across Allen Creek, it'll come out on Lincoln. Will the study include the impact on Lincoln and Bridge and G Street?
Yeah, that's part of what this is going to be a very expensive study because part of it is going to do that. And where are the transportation bottlenecks? As you know, coming down G Street, I think once you're past, and I'm horrible with streets, 4th, but definitely once you're past Pine, G Street will probably work as it ties into Lower River Road and then Lincoln Road, right, or Upper River Road. But when you get farther up, G Street is not going to function to get a lot of traffic on, moving across town. So then we have to figure out how to move people over to E and F to get that traffic kind of flowing around. So it's going to take a look at all of those items. That's part of the reason when they did the initial study, they just did modeling based on the current network. We're going to have to rebuild that network in the model and run those and see what it looks like.
Gordon?
Have you looked at merging this project and the bike path that you lead close to 5th Street you were thinking about? Or maybe they're too far apart?
We have not, but it is something that could be considered.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I just was curious to know is, and I didn't see it when I was looking at the plan, the kind of city council plan for the next few years. I mean, building a bridge is a decade-long process that you're going to need to be able to leverage tons of money from the state, the feds. So I guess has there been a lot of council discussion around that becoming a very long-term strategy of like, yep, we're doing this. This is going to be a decade-long process?
Yeah, I'm looking to some of the counselors who may want to speak to that, but they have recently given us direction that this is a priority. We need to determine that location.
Rob?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that we actually, we pushed pretty hard that we want to get this started. Yep. And if we're going to commit $1 million to the study, that's the first step. So, and I don't believe that we're looking at it as the last step. We're looking at it, but that's necessary to spend the $1 million, and it's not for naught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions related to transportation?
Seeing none, go.
Excellent. We're going to fly through this. So stormwater, this is on pages 184 to 195 of your large budget book. The stormwater operations budget is responsible for the repair and maintenance of surface and subsurface drainage systems. They are responsible for our street sweeping contract. Right-of-way vegetation control. This is another one that is kind of shared between transportation, stormwater, and then also the park staff who we are grateful to who manage the contracts for that. And also they are responsible for the intergovernmental agreement that we have with Grants Pass Irrigation District for the shared use of some of their facilities. They are also responsible for our MS4 Phase 2 permit. And I always abbreviate that MS4. It's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, 4 S's. And it's easier just to say MS4. And that was a permit that we received now 3 years ago. We're in our third full year, which puts some pretty strict regulations on stormwater discharges to the Rogue River. And it tells us that we have to ramp up our game. We need to require contractors to be more proactive with stormwater runoff, both pre, during, and post-construction. We need to look at more aggressive forms of retention to keep that water just from free-flowing to the river. It's a pretty complex permit. And we're right in year 3. We have 5 years to come into compliance. I will say that we are ahead of schedule on that and doing a pretty incredible job. The team is. We are recommending the reallocation of personnel, so you are seeing this one up to 4.98, and that is down from a 4.93. And again, that weird number is because they pay for part of a locator. So we have one person who does locates for 3 divisions, and then we also are paying for part of the urban forester out of this department. Because if you go read all the tags around here, trees are great for the stormwater system, except for the leaves. We don't always like the leaves because they plug up the storm drains, but they are great as a stormwater retention device. So the overall program, you'll see that we are predicting that those budgets are all a little bit up. The stormwater maintenance, which is where the work is getting done, our customer service is up slightly. General program ops is, again, that's where our capital dollars come in and out of. Now that the stormwater utility is fully funded, we are getting a fair amount of money coming in that we are able to put out into the projects, and you're going to see a list of projects here shortly that's pretty impressive. And then our capital construction, and this is where we are holding all those reserves for those projects. So looking at our revenue side, our revenues are up slightly. This is as new houses are coming online or they're redeveloping. These charges are assessed based on what we call an ESU, or an equivalent unit. That's based on the amount of impervious surface. At the beginning of the utility, when this was presented to council, we did a pretty extensive study, and we took the average residential home, and that's out of every home in the city of Grants Pass, and we came up with a unit, and it's a 1. And that is for every residential home gets charged 1. Whether it's a giant house or a small house or a medium house, we know that a residential unit is 1. We then use that multiple when we calculate what a commercial property pays for their fees, and it works out pretty well. So we can see that the stormwater fees are predicted to go up just a little bit. The other thing is our capital construction, where we are able to add an additional $900,000 into our capital program. Looking at the stormwater operations budget, this one, we see the personnel go up a significant amount, which is going up more than the other went down, but there's more people allocated to this program, and those people are moving up through their steps, and all of the other associated employee costs did increase. We held flat on materials and supplies, as well as contractual and professional services. And then just slight increase in our direct charges, so that the overall budget only increased about $76,000. They did a really good job with the changes made to be able to hold it as flat as they did. And again, this is a very personnel-heavy program. As you can see, we're equal to both personnel and contractual, and that contractual is all of that heavy equipment that they use, but it's also the street sweeping contract, which is a pretty significant portion of that budget. And they play a very important role in our MS4 permit compliance. That service is contracted out in Grants Pass. It is a far more cost-effective method of delivering that service than us owning sweeping trucks and paying people to go out and operate those. So primary changes, again, $129,000 up in personnel.
Rick has another question.
Rick?
Jason, on that allocation of the funds, where does GPID fit in there?
They are located in the contractual services lines. So they're part of that 49%.
Thank you.
And that payment now is approximately $100,000 a year. I think we just crossed $100,000 last year. It started out in the mid-90s, does that sound right? And it increases by CPI each year. So some of the efficiencies for this department. This year, we added a new closed circuit television van, CCTV van, to perform routine inspections and cleaning. Sorry.
Sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yep.
No, my question is about the revenue and the fee for stormwater.
Yeah.
I believe that's scheduled to be adjusted by the CPI.
It does adjust by CPI annually.
And is that what you're expecting that will be?
Yeah, we generally tend to predict revenues a little bit low. We don't want to over predict and end up under collecting. I would rather under predict and over collect and have a higher fund balance. I don't want to budget for a capital project based on a revenue projection that's too high and then not be able to fund that project.
So when will that be implemented? July or January?
Ooh. I'm putting JC on the spot. I believe they all go into effect in January.
Okay.
And Adam, if you can correct me, please, if I'm wrong. I know that Adam's listening too. Okay, I'm going to keep moving while they come up with that answer. I'm pretty sure they all get implemented in January. They try to do, I know that that's when water, because you don't want to implement the water increase in the middle of summer, which would be July 1. So we try to keep that when usage is lowest.
Well, by the end of the calendar year, the CPI will be up pretty substantially.
It is possible, yeah. So the CCTV van is what we use to perform routine maintenance, inspections, and cleanings. This truck is really important. The MS4 permit specifies that we have to inspect and clean 20% of the system each year. That's a pretty daunting task when you consider the size of the stormwater system. The truck really helps with that. In fact, this week alone, we went out and found a problem. We had a complaint from the recent rains of water backing up onto a property. We started TVing the pipes in the area, ended up finding a blockage where a bunch of gravel had washed down the drain in addition to some roots. We're able to go in now and clean those out. It's pretty awesome, the tool. And then we have to keep all of those videos to be able to show those to DEQ upon request. The other one is the dedicated funding for stormwater program. Council implemented the stormwater utility rate, I want to say 5 years ago now. That was a big step. Before, stormwater was completely underfunded. We did not do stormwater work. It was kind of the, you might cut a 6-foot section of pipe out if you were in there and you happened to nick it. But there was no coordinated stormwater planning. There was no funds. We were just sharing transportation dollars, but there wasn't a coordinated effort to develop the stormwater system. And now we're able to do that. And since then, we've alleviated quite a bit of localized flooding and prevented it. And now we're working on really improving the existing piping system to make sure that it's ready to last the long haul. So any questions before I move on to capital? Was I right?
January 1st is correct.
Go ahead, Tripp.
So I appreciate the wanting to be conservative on the revenue forecast.
Yeah.
Have we ever thought about lagging the CPI a little bit to be able to provide an exact escalation when it comes time for budget? And kind of the mechanism thinking here is like, okay, so utility rates escalate, say, in June. We will have known probably in March what the December CPI was, and obviously the December CPI from the year before. And so in knowing, we'll know in March what the escalation is going to be in June, and therefore we can escalate the budget, the revenue forecast in the budget by exactly what it's going to be, rather than like a little bit of an underage.
I'm going to look. I hear what you're saying. It seems like it could be done.
So with my 10th day on the job, let me see if I can kind of give you an answer that maybe not be directly what we do, but what I've experienced. In developing a budget that is going to be effective July 1, we do take that information of what the CPI is in December to try and figure out approximately what that July 1 may be. Yeah. It's not an exact science. It's just for us to start developing these numbers and get us as close as we can to coming up with the right number.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking in the rate making mechanism itself, there's nothing saying you can't use CPI on a lag. And so if you're writing the budget in January, you probably know at least what the October over October CPI was. And so then, yeah, in an inflationary environment like today, it's going to be off, but you'll have like very good certainty as to what your revenue is going to be if you're escalating rates in June based on what the change in the CPI was in October.
Right, but the multiple pieces to come together as far as contracts and other language that go with it, it's hard to be that on time with those kinds of adjustments.
Anything else on stormwater budget before I move on to capital?
This probably shouldn't come here, but I don't know where to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Has the city looked at setting up a procurement division? Because there is all kinds, every department has some guy who thinks he's an expert, and there is some expertise in just the procurement execution portion.
Yeah. Yes and no. We actually have had a conversation on this. So most of the capital projects, this is work that we bid out. It could be everything from coating courts at parks or drainage in parks. It could be small little street or sidewalk job. Those all run through the engineering department so that we have a very consistent approach to those. All of the vehicles are purchased by our fleet department, so we don't have each department out purchasing and upfitting their own vehicles. That helps us to keep things consistent. You know, there's a lot of smaller things, you know, paper, pens, office supplies, that are procured outside of the city, and we're just not quite at a position where we're able to fund a position, but we do that a lot with, once you get above a certain dollar threshold, on all the major stuff that is occurring.
And Gordon, we asked that question too last year, and, you know, the size of the city, if you have a town of 500, you don't have a procurement officer. If you have New York City, you got a whole department of them. And Grants Pass is kind of on the threshold of perhaps needing one, but not quite there yet. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. It is a conversation that we visit internally, it seems like at least once a year or so. So capital, this is project DO6337, and we're back into your small capital book. And this is on page 47. This is a great project. It's been on the books for quite a while. We're finally ready to get this project going. We've gone out, we've dug holes in the ground. One of the things in this area was ground stability. We were very, very worried because this is a deep line. That we weren't going to be able to dig deep enough and have the earth stand up while we're doing the work. So we sent a crew out there. They dug a really deep trench and left it and watched what happened and filmed it, and so that we're able to hand that off to the contractors so they know what to expect. We are asking for an additional allocation of $400,000 in stormwater capital, and the last little bit of Sand Creek SDCs. This is the only project left on the books that are eligible for the Sand Creek SDCs, and that's $1,828, which depletes that account. The total project cost is about $1.6 million. There will be some remaining preliminary design, but just we're really close to getting this done. And it's really unique if you've never been out there. The line terminates 6.5 feet underground and then just comes up through the ground and starts running overland. Very weird. Very weird. So, great project. And as you know, the Redwood area is flatter than a fritter. Getting water to move out there is difficult. So DO6353, this is emergency storm drain projects. It's on page 48 of your capital. Now that we have dedicated stormwater resources, we are allocating about $50,000 a year. This helps us to fund emergency storm drain projects. The storm drain system is the oldest and most derelict of our underground utilities, just because a lot of the pipes were actually old sewer lines that were abandoned in place and converted to stormwater as we put in new sewer lines. That's the condition of these pipes. So now we're having to go back and replace these pipes with actual stormwater pipes. We're going to talk about one of those here coming up pretty quick. We do recommend an additional allocation of $50,000 annually. It is kind of just a holding account to where we have funds available should a pipe fail and we're able to get out there and get that repaired in an emergency. DO6371, this is 5th Street storm drain between G and M. This is exactly one of those pipes. This replaces a structurally deficient storm drain line on 5th between G and M streets. This is a clay pipe. Okay.
I don't know who's wanting to ask the question.
Sorry, Rick has a question.
Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Jason, when you're mentioning replacing the old storm sewer pipes, isn't the storm sewer pipe pretty much undersized the sewer pipe pretty much undersized compared to the new storm drain pipe?
Very much so. Yeah, in addition, they're put together with joints that weren't designed to keep out water. They were really more laid like a curtain drain style, so they just weren't designed to be utilized as storm drains. It was a very convenient pipe in the ground that was still largely intact when they needed to run a storm drain line. So it made sense.
Thank you.
Yep. So on that though, Fifth Street storm drain, this is DO 6371 again, page 49. This is a pipe that used to be a clay sewer line running that entire distance. It was superseded as it began to fail and it became undersized. It was left in place and converted to stormwater. Now we need to actually convert that to a legitimate stormwater line. This area gets a lot of, collects a lot of rainfall. You know, those all goes into the storm drains. It's undersized because of the way that the old pipes were laid. There are no gasketed joints. They're kind of just pipe stuck next to pipe, stuck next to pipe. It is a lot of root intrusion. And root intrusion within these pipes just slows the water down, which then causes it to back up into folks' yards. So this is a project we really want to see starting. When are we going to start? Next year. So we are asking for $350,000 of stormwater capital and $125,000 of stormwater SDCs. Any project that we're putting in SDCs, those are actually increasing capacity. So that's one of the things about system development charge dollars. They can only go to expand capacity. We could not replace this pipe with the same size pipe and put it back in the ground and utilize system development charges. So we'll be upsizing it as well as bringing it up to current standards. I'm gonna start looking back over this shoulder too, just to make sure. Project DO 6385. This is a project that's been on the books about since the IGA was signed, maybe the year after the IGA was signed. And this project is going to regrade, resurface the canal, the Grants Pass Irrigation District Canal between Wagon Wheel Drive and Allen Creek to alleviate periodic localized flooding. Some of the ditch system is under-maintained, it's had a long life. This project is going to go in and reline it, hopefully add a little bit of capacity. The funding recommendation, if you look at it, it has $375,000 allocated, but it's a GPID match. So we've already put in $375,000 or more. We are waiting for GPID to put in their share. This should be a joint project per the IGA. Any project that is on a shared facility, we are supposed to share that cost 50-50. So that's why it's been hanging out here for a while. There's just not a certain urgency to get that done.
So Jason, we were just looking at this and we had a question that the estimated total cost, there's some revisions there on all of these.
Yeah.
And there's significant increases. And I'm sure there's a rationale for those increases.
So on this one in particular, is that?
Well, it's consistent throughout all of them. So whatever is appropriate, just so that we know.
I'm going to let Wade jump in, but I'm also going to add, so a lot of times that change is a change in scope. The original project was this, but as we looked at it, we really are expanding it to here. Some of it also as we revise them, as we know that material costs have escalated.
That was exactly what I was going to say. A lot of times we had these on the 90 to 100% design plans. We're about ready to go out and we're doing rolling estimates as we're going, or we're opening bids from other projects and they're coming in 10, 20% over our engineer's estimate. Well, we try to learn, but we can't stay ahead of the market. So we'll bump it up by 10 or 20% or whatever we're seeing. And then in the market that we have today, even now when we go out, it's going to be above by the time we get to the market. But
Sure, and then whatever it is, that's what it is. And
we need to do the work, so.
And then you have to go back and look at the budget and make adjustments either in a positive or negative way.
It is, and one of the things that we do is we evaluate where we're at in the inflation cycle, the importance of the jobs, you know, so that sometimes there's a job that's just so important, we're gonna pay the extra inflation. There's other jobs that we can delay, you know, and wait for inflation or that bubble to kind of recede and really catch it on the negative cycle. That worked out really well for us in the last recession, where because we had retained so much money, we were able to put out a lot of work during that time and get a lot of work done at a very, very good price. But you're right, there are some projects, we're gonna have to move them forward, and the market is what it is, and unfortunately, that's what we're gonna have to pay.
Karen, you got somebody in mind?
Rick has a question.
Rick, you're on again.
Jason, GPID was doing some gunlighting of the canals out there. Would that be part of this project as well?
It's another phase. It's actually farther down the canal and kind of around the corner from where they were adding shotcrete on top of their existing shotcrete. And so one of the things that we've been talking with them about is trying to increase the capacity on the canals. And our concern with that approach was that essentially they were reducing the inside diameter of those canals. So,
thank you.
Trip?
I'm curious, how was the 50-50 split arrived at between us and the irrigation district?
yeah, that years of negotiation.
I guess the comma, was it a process of negotiation, or was there some sort of rate study-esque effort made at what the equitable allocation would be?
Do you want to speak to this? It's all of the above. There was quite a bit of, where their expenses are, what their maintenance costs are. We also looked at when they're in service versus when stormwater would be in service, and that it kind of was the easiest way, because we could argue, well, the rainy season is really only here, so therefore we should only have to pay for 30% and you guys get 70%. And they're going, well, but it rains in the summer, and so there was a lot of work. It was also how many miles of canal are actually within the city and how many are shared versus not shared. So there was a lot of work that Aaron and Jay Meredith and GPID and Mark Bartholomew did, and there was a lot of back and forth, and 50-50, it just was the easiest way to kind of say yes. Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. Endemic, we're going to hear a lot about Endemic. I think we've got 3 projects identified on Endemic. This is a C Street and Endemic stormwater project. This is going to be updating stormwater near the intersection of C Street and Endemic. We're asking for an additional funding of about $150,000. We do believe the total project cost will be about $1 million. This will pay for preliminary design and determine the total project cost. This one actually, this is another one where stormwater just evolved, and unfortunately when it evolves you end up with houses over stormwater lines that are failing, which is not a condition that we want. So this is one where we're going to get up there, get the lines replaced, get the lines sealed off, and make a much better system. And that was the end of stormwater. Any questions remaining on stormwater?
Seeing none.
Okay, let's move on to water. Pages 196 to 213. And Chair, you'll let me know when you guys need a break, right?
Sure.
Okay. This is our treatment and distribution services. So water is responsible for water treatment, water distribution, customer service, debt service, general program ops, and of course capital construction, which is a large part of what we do. They are responsible for pumping and treating the water from the Rogue River, distributing, metering, and billing for that water, monitoring and reporting on water quality, cross-connection and backflow programs, one of the most important programs that we operate, maintaining on the treatment facilities, pump stations, and reservoirs. We have 13 pump stations with 53 pumps, ranging in size from 40 gallons in a minute to 2,300 gallons per minute. Not to mention the pumps at the treatment plant, which are up to 7,000 gallons a minute, pretty significant horsepower. We have 8 reservoirs ranging in size from 45,000 gallons to over 5 million gallons. We have over 191 miles of distribution piping ranging in size from 2-inch, yes, 2-inch, there's still quite a bit of it in the ground out there, through 36-inch diameter piping. Our customer service department, they're great, but they are responsible for getting all of our bills out and doing our customer service, of course, but meter leak checks, our ons and offs, and of course billing. We have a recommended FTEs of 6 in our treatment division and 9.84. Again, that 0.4 is our locator in our distribution division, and that's the folks that are out there actually digging in the dirt, putting in the meter services, responding to customer complaints. And I'm not going to talk about it, but I put that in there. It's kind of small and the printouts even, but that's kind of a schematic of how our system is. We cover 5 distinct pressure zones with 2 modified pressure zones in between. It's a very complex system compared to a lot of cities that really have like 1 pressure zone. But the guys and gals that work there do a great job. So looking at the overall project, there's a lot of dollars in here, and what I want to take note of is that when we look at that capital construction line, that $28 million line, those are dollars that are being held in capital projects for current and future work. Water treatment budget is up $200,000. We'll talk about that here shortly. Water distribution is up $97,000, essentially holding pretty flat. Customer service is fairly flat, although we are helping to fund some capital equipment down there. Debt service is holding steady, and general program ops again is up. The reason that's up is we have more capital, and the capital flows through the general program ops budget. So as the money comes in, it goes into the general program ops and then distributes out to our capital projects. And then capital construction is just the funds that are being held. Yes, sir.
Jason, on our current utility bills, there's a line, water plant replacement fee.
Yes.
It's currently $10.80 a month for household. Does that show up in the sale of water line?
So we are tracking it as a separate line in the budget, but it just recently. I'll be real honest with you, it just comes through and it goes directly into the capital program. But we did decide this last year to go ahead and put that into a separate billing code so that we're able to track it much more accurately because we think just from a transparency standpoint, it's a good idea.
Also, that fee is scheduled to increase in fiscal '23 to, I believe, $13.50.
That is
per
correct.
month, and that's still planned. That
Yes.
increase.
Yes. And that's a very, very important part of our debt funding plan for the water treatment plant project. And it will not increase for the duration of the project. That's one of the things. It is not tied to the COLA like all the other rates are.
Right. Do we have any estimate of what that fee is bringing in? I hear what you're saying, that it's all...
I do not.
Okay.
I'm looking at other people, but we can get that number for you, Mr. Bradbury. Let me make a note real quick.
If you got this times $3.
So looking at the revenues, our beginning balances is holding very steady. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry. I just was curious to know, is the sale of water connected to the CBI?
It is.
Okay.
Yep, it's another one very similar where, but within that sale of water is also showing up that treatment plant replacement fee line. So they do, because those are all the revenues that are coming in from the utility bill, it is in there as well.
Tammy?
Curious if the fee goes away once the treatment plant is built?
So not when the debt service has paid off, that's when that fee will sunset.
Go ahead.
Just kind of a more global concern, I guess. So we've got 2 fees that are connected to our CBI. It's all going to kind of come to fruition, it sounds like, in January. Are we worried about kind of rate shock to our maybe more fixed incomes folks of, hey, there's CBI is probably going to be somewhere around 10%, and now all of a sudden it's a 10% increase. Yeah. And when that does happen, do we see a drop in non-payment or an increase of non-payment when that happens? And are you guys kind of factoring that looking forward?
Yeah, all of the above, that all does occur. Let me tell you, I think my perception of a couple of ways that this gets handled. One is the council has the ultimate say of whether or not to implement that CPI at the full rate. So that does come before them for their consideration. The other piece of that is we have multiple low-income assistance programs available for folks, including the new, and I'm going to get the initials wrong, LIWA, Low Income Water Assistance, which is a state-run program that is rolled out which provides quite a bit of resources to folks that are struggling to pay their bills. And it covers the majority of the utility bill. It doesn't cover it all, because it is meant for those wet utilities, but it is a great amount of help. So there are several opportunities, but yes, we do see, when we have those larger increases, you do see a momentary increase in people struggling to make that bill, and then it kind of settles in back to our normal rate.
Jason, just to confirm what we've talked about.
Yeah.
The Urban Renewal Agency, $3.5 million, will require the Urban Renewal Board to make that appropriation?
That is correct. We are showing that as a revenue source for this year, but it is not a direct appropriation. The council, the Urban Renewal Agency Board will have to take an action to transfer those funds here. They actually are just being shown in a capital line in the Urban Renewal budget, which you will see next Tuesday. So they're not designated water treatment plant in there. So the council, Urban Renewal Agency Board, which is the council, will have the opportunity at a later date to determine whether or not they do choose to move them here. The intent was, and what Adam Schultz had presented previously, was that front-loading the urban renewal payment, which is there for the debt service, would actually lower the overall Urban Renewal Agency's obligation to pay on the water plant debt. So, and I'm sure that that'll be part, or potentially that'll be part of the presentation on the Urban Renewal Agency. So that is up $350,000 because we didn't have one of those back in '22. Otherwise, everything else is staying pretty flat. Capital construction is up $7 million, but that is because of capital transfers. And they look really, really large right now, and thank you, Council, for taking such a proactive step in raising the rate ahead of the water treatment plant project, because that's allowing us to really build up that water treatment plant project reserve, which we'll see here in a little bit, which is allowing us to self-fund a very large portion of that project, which is saving millions of dollars in interest fees down the road. But that's why that number looks so large. Eventually, that number is going to go way, way down, and what you're going to see is the debt service payment go way, way up. They're just going to offset. We are expecting to have about a debt service payment of close to $4 to $4.5 million when the treatment plant is completely done. So water treatment, this is where the water gets cleaned. Personnel is up $80,000. Again, that's just employees. We've actually been able to keep employees for a few years. We went through about 2 years where we were losing them to other agencies pretty frequently. Materials and supplies took a pretty large jump upwards. We rebid chemicals this year, chlorine and coagulant. They went through the roof. The other piece of that is most companies didn't want to give us a 12-month bid. They wanted to give us a 3-month bid and give us a new price every 3 months. Luckily, we found enough companies that were able to commit to a 12-month price, but that means we're probably paying more up front than we might shoulda, oughta. The chemical industry is going a little bit nuts right now, both because the raw materials are harder to get, and we're competing with similar materials that are used in the building industry. So we're going to face that problem moving forward. Contractual and professional services is fairly flat, but that's where we pay for our power as well as some other items. Otherwise, the budget remained relatively flat, increasing $2 million or $200,000 on $2 million, so about 10% increase, but that is an increase. And this is a funny budget. It used to be almost a perfect third. It has shifted a little bit to where personnel and contractual take a little bit more and materials are a little bit less. But it really is all personnel, chemicals, and power. Our power bills are about $25,000 a month plus in the summertime and increasing. So it's a pretty big deal. And we already talked about those major adjustments. Moving to water distribution, these are the folks out in the field installing your new water services, short water line projects, repairing the main breaks when they happen. This budget, Craig and his team did a really nice job. We did go up in our contractual. We've added a couple of vehicles. And when you start paying off, their old vehicles were all paid off, so the new depreciation fund started and their vehicle costs went up. Also, we have added $10,000 in capital outlay. And I'm going to say this out loud and don't laugh at me, but we're purchasing a new coffin, and that's kind of just what they're called. It's actually a trench shoring system, and it's to keep the people safe when they're in the trenches. And why you would call a trench shoring system, which is there to keep people safe, a coffin, I have no idea, but that's what they're called in the industry. So, so it is, and underground work is some of the most dangerous work that we do. Trenching, you know, especially you start digging a ditch and you think it looks safe, but a lot of times they're not. And so trench shoring is a really important piece, and our existing system is a little old and outdated, hard to use, which makes them less inclined to use it. So this is a good step for operator safety. Funds, this is strictly a personnel project. We have people out in the field doing work, and then materials and supplies is really what drives this project, with contractual, of course, but most of that is tied up in vehicles and a few contracts for backflow and some other items. And the major changes which we just talked about. I cut the side of my slide off. Water debt service. Important thing to note here is FY24 is the last year on these debt offerings, which constructed the reservoir, reservoir number 3, which is our largest reservoir. And that pays off in FY24, which is exciting because that's about when we're going to be incurring the new debt for the water treatment plant at about that same time. But the good news is we'll be freeing up about another $500,000 in resources. So. Questions on the water program before I move into capital?
I do have somewhat of, sorry.
You noticed that billing comes through you. I always thought it came through finance, or do you fund those people?
That one,
Okay.
Yep. We just pay a portion of it.
Okay.
Jason is correct. We did split the revenue lines. However, they're not budgeted that way. But we can see some of that data because that just started, it looks like, in February of this year.
Yep.
So only a short few months. And in the short few months that we have been collecting that data, it's about $500,000 from about February till about today.
Thank you.
Other questions? Here we go to capital.
Great. Let's talk water capital. So WA 4971, this is Meadowwood Reservoir, or reservoir number 16. This is a project that's been on the books for a few years. It is a very important reservoir for the folks that are living in that area. We now have a zone in the Meadowwood, Panoramic Loop, kind of Cloverlawn-ish area that's about 280 to 300 and some homes that are running on closed loop pump stations. What that means is a closed loop pump station is very similar to what you have if you have a well. You turn on your faucet, the pump turns on. Well, when you get 300 houses that are running on a system like that, it's really hard to control. This area has been needing this reservoir for quite some time. We're at a really prime time to get this installed. The developer is doing his next phase of development. We're hoping to get 1 or 2 lots at the top of his development and get that reservoir installed. It will be a nice amenity, we hope, to his development. We'll try and keep it looking as nice as possible. But we are asking for an additional $1 million in water capital plus $250,000 in water SDCs for this project. We do estimate the total project cost to be about $4 million. I do want to note, or Wade wants me to note, that property acquisition will actually happen through a different capital project. Sorry,
Karen has a...
Rick has a question.
Got it.
Jason, I think you're beginning to answer my question. Keep going.
I didn't quite catch that, Counselor. Did you say that I had answered your question?
No, I think you're in the process of answering my question. You're talking about the property for the site.
Yes. Yeah, the property acquisition is actually going to be paid for out of a different project, which is WA 4742, which has a cash balance in it. I don't believe we actually put more funds in it this year. And it's a project that we use for purchasing property for pump stations and reservoirs for water facilities. It also pays for like easements if we have to run a water line or something like that.
Do you know the approximate size of those two parcels?
We're hoping to get it on one, they're going to be pretty small. This is not a giant reservoir. It's 1 million gallons. I think our diameter was going to be 30 feet. Yeah, Wade's giving me hand signals from the audience, counselor. So it's pretty small diameter. It's a standard lot size. What we're hoping, though, is to be able to get in ahead of his construction and get it constructed while we have a little bit more room to work, as opposed to trying to build it in between a couple of pretty nice houses.
Thank you.
Okay. Project WA 5096. This is a project that's been on the books for quite a while. It's on page 60 of your capital book. This funds repairs at the water treatment plant necessary to continue operations. So the treatment plant is still our most valuable asset. It is still degrading at a fairly good clip. We still have to perform some pretty significant maintenance to keep that thing going. We've been drawing that fund down. We're recommending an additional $50,000 this year, just so that we have a reserve of funds available should we need to get in and make a pretty major structural repair. And then the big one, this is project WA 6207. It's the water treatment plant replacement. This covers all the costs associated with the planning, design, and construction of a new water treatment plant. This year, we are recommending an additional allocation of $2.9 million in water capital, $200,000 worth of water system development charges, and $1.5 million from general fund lands and building. Total project cost was now $95 million at our last estimate. We are working on driving that cost down. This did cover property acquisition, design costs, which we will be presenting to council on June 1st, and construction of the new facility.
Gordon? What's the estimated completion date? Guess, I understand.
Yeah, we're out to 2026 now. We'll be bringing systems online in late 2025, with the whole thing being fully operational, in 2026. This is project WA 6360. It's one of the projects that I think we've probably closed one of these and reopened it as a new project. We are recommending an additional funding of $320,000 in water capital. This is the project that we use to go out and replace a lot of those 2-inch water mains that we're talking about, or 4-inch. These are undersized mains that are serving areas that are starting to have service issues because we've connected too many houses, or those 2-inch mains have rusted internally until they're shut off. And when we say 2-inch mains, most of them are actually 2-inch galvanized pipes that have been buried underground for far too long. And if you have any at your house, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where the insides and the outsides rust about as quickly, and they're pretty leaky. So we get a lot of bang for our buck with this. We do estimate total project cost is $2.4 million, but that's just a guesstimate. It could be more or less. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ongoing project here. This is WA 6362. This is one that we have put temporarily on hold. We really need to get this project done, but we're constructing 9,700 lineal feet of 16-inch water line. And purchasing 16-inch ductile iron piping right now is impossible and very expensive, but this will install a very important loop out in the Redwood area, in addition to providing water to the south side of Redwood Avenue, or Redwood Highway. We are adding an additional funding of $900,000, or recommending an additional $900,000 in water capital. Total project cost is 3.4 million with periodic ongoing maintenance. We do believe we'll be bidding this probably next summer. Is that what we were thinking, or maybe farther out? We're going to watch the market. I just saw Wade shrug.
Well, we've designed this project in phases. So we've got a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 is the most critical because it'll end up creating some looping and reduce that risk that we have of a failure on Redwood Avenue. We would love to get the entire thing together. So we've got, we may do phase 1, or if we see the market start coming down, we might pull that back and go out for the whole project. But I think we need to get one of them done. So I think we'll do phase 1, we'll get bid this fall sometime. It'd be great winter work.
Okay. Karen?
And Rick has a question.
Rick?
So Jason, on that project, would that still use ductile iron, or are we able to convert to plastic, and is there much difference in cost between the two? Although I think we're completely dedicated in our system to ductile iron, is that true?
We are still planning on sticking with ductile iron, although we are looking at other alternatives. Plastic right now is hard to get, if not harder to get, and so the prices are going up just because the demand for piping everywhere is so high. And on such an important line, we probably want to stick with ductile on this particular one, just for future tapping, and it's kind of what we're used to within the system. We are looking at the raw water line for the new water treatment plant as possibly being HDPE. We're evaluating that cost along with steel, so that's where we may deviate from the ductile.
I appreciate you looking into that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, what is the meaning of looping in this context?
Yeah. So looping just means that the water pipes all connect. And so if we bring water in over here and we come down here and up here, we want to make sure that we make a full circle. And the reason is because water is going to flow the easiest way. But if you end up with a long line, at the very end, you're going to run out of pressure because people are going to be pulling all of that off. So we loop all of those lines so that the water can go multiple directions. And if there's a breakage, you're able to refeed it from a different side.
Josh?
How much capacity do you think that this loop on the south side will add?
A lot. So this really is an important connector for a number of reasons. The first is we have a single point of failure in the Redwood area that if a main break occurs, we lose all water to the residential areas in that zone. So this one is really high priority, and as Wade said, we'll probably get that first segment done. What it does, it does at the end of the line out towards RCC, we're going to boost the fire flows by probably double. Same thing out towards Redwood Elementary out there where we're out towards the fringes of the system, because you're now going to have those redundant feeds. We're going to be able to get more fire flow.
Trip?
So if the project is boosting capacity a lot, why not use SDCs here?
So in order to use SDCs, it has to actually be explicitly outlined in our water master services, or water master plan.
Yeah.
Anyways, this one, for whatever reason, wasn't shown in that alignment, so we can't.
So, but we can revise the plan, so should we infer from that the juice just isn't worth the squeeze for the plan amendment process?
I think the amendment process could be fairly easy, and we could look at that. We don't have any trouble spending the SDCs, and we do have the other funds. But you're right, this is a good one. The reason it was left out of the plan is because the RCC area is very complicated. It's where things really start to split. We're at the end of the pressure zone, and what the plan said is we really need to do a study of the entire area. However, this deficiency came up ahead of that, so we went ahead and planned this line. It is something that we could look at. I don't know if it benefits us, because the amendment to add a project or a couple of projects in would probably be pretty minor.
Do you want to respond, Wade, or?
I was just going to echo what Jason said, that we have no trouble spending our SDCs. You know, any extra that we have, we are sinking into the water plant right now, which can eat up as much as, so we're not going to, I guess we'd be robbing from the water plant to take it out there, but it's all the same money.
Go ahead.
And there's no complications for future, though, that if we're not using SDC charges for this loop project, if we do see something later, you can change it up and do something later, right, with SDC out there? Okay.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
Project 6369, this is on page 69 of your capital book. This project is for replacement and refurbishment of equipment at the water filtration plant. And again, that we've just been drawing the project down over the years as we do projects to maintain some of that critical high dollar equipment. We just are recommending an additional allocation of $50,000 to ensure that we have funds available should it be needed due to a major failure or to preempt a major failure at the water treatment plant.
Go ahead.
This is project WA 6415. It is reservoir and pump station communication upgrades. So this project is going to upgrade the communication equipment at the remote reservoir and pump station locations, and it's on page 72. I forgot that part for you on the capital book. Our SCADA system was put in late 1999. We are now 22 years on. The bulk of the equipment that it is based on has been obsoleted by the manufacturer. When we move to the new water treatment plant, we would like that to be moving the remote SCADA all to newer equipment at a similar time frame. So what we're trying to do is get the plan together, move those together in similar phases, but treat them as separate projects. So this program will identify what needs to be done. The first phase, we are recommending funding it with $50,000 worth of water capital, additional to what was already there. Estimated total project is probably on the order of about $500,000, and there will be routine and periodic maintenance after that. Okay. First of our new projects. This is WA 6422, and this is Wesley Lane water upgrade. Page 73 of your capital book. Wesley Lane is a funny little street in the northeast part of town over by Grants Pass High School. This project is intended to replace a 2-inch water line with a standard 8-inch line and install a fire hydrant on Wesley Lane. We are recommending funding it with $100,000 worth of water capital in addition to $50,000 in transportation funds. For a total project cost of about $150,000. There will be very, very little routine and periodic maintenance, as this is really kind of a private street is the best way to describe it, but it's a subdivision that developed very odd. We are trying to rectify, these folks have a horrible water issue where 2-inch main, but it's in a semi-private street, it's not a public street. And the people at the end of the street just don't have water pressure, nor do they have access to a fire hydrant. So we're going to rectify that and get it back into condition.
Trip?
So, I mean, the term private there is kind of an interesting one, right?
Yeah.
If this is an actually private street that's owned by the homeowners, why is this not their responsibility?
So this is where we're getting into a really... It is, the road is a county parcel. So there is some question. Okay. I would love to chat offline with you.
Okay, Jason. Oh.
Ha!
So before you shift gears, would you like to take a short break? I mean, everybody up here can suffer along or sneak away, but you can't.
I was going to say, if they need a break, I am good with giving them a break. Otherwise, I've got we're on slide 66. We're halfway there.
There you go. Go for it.
I'm going to keep moving then. So we're back into the big budget book. This is pages 214 through 231, and it is our wastewater services program. After wastewater, they start going faster. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So the wastewater program conveys and treats all wastewater discharged within the city and the Redwood area. We monitor SIUs, and you're going, what's an SIU? That is a significant industrial user with our industrial pretreatment program. We maintain the collection system, pump and lift stations, and all piping systems. We have 5 pump and lift stations with 11 pumps ranging in size from 100 through 1,500 gallons per minute, and 174 miles of piping, ranging in size from 4 to 48 inches of gravity sewer. Customer service, they are the ones that handle all of our billing and lateral issues through finance, with a FTE allocation of 5.83 within our collections division and 8 at our water restoration plant. The overall program budget, again, pretty flat over here, where the program has been fairly stable. Wastewater collections is up a little, as is wastewater treatment. Our customer service is also up a little. Again, there's some capital that's included in that for, I believe it's a new, something to do with mailing, folder machine, something for stuffing. Kimberly explained it to me. It has to do with folding and stuffing envelopes. It's really important to their operation. General program ops, this is where our money comes in, and again, we move that money through here to our capital program. Go ahead. I could see you wanted to jump in.
No, you are correct. It is a very complex piece of machinery that allows us to save some time with people and folds it for us.
Yep.
Stuff's mail.
She explained it to me, and probably like when I'm talking about water, how she kind of glazes over. I kind of went, okay, great. It's that most important thing for your job, but it was really important. So general program ops is where we bring our capital dollars in and move them out. That is down slightly this year, but we're about at the same level that we were before. Capital construction, we were able to transfer an additional $1 million this year, which is great. And then debt service is holding steady, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Looking at the revenue side, we are predicting revenues up about 300,000. Again, these are probably slightly lower than what may actually realize. But again, I think we're probably better estimating on the lower side and not allocating funds that we're not going to receive, which could cause a capital project to stall. And then also our capital construction, again, is up $1 million.
Just confirming, this is a CBI attached fee as well?
It is. Yeah, all of the utilities save the I want to say transportation is not tied to CPI.
The one on your utility bill is, but the gas tax is not.
I thought the one on the I didn't think I'll look that up. So wastewater collections. Personnel services is up 50,000. That is largely because of, again, we've been able to keep personnel, and those personnel are moving up through their steps. I will tell you that we are facing a very challenging retirement there. Our longtime collections superintendent is retiring this year. We're going to be challenged to refill his position. Lance has been amazing. We honor and respect his decision to leave, and he has graciously consented to sticking with us for a while we try and recruit. But that's going to be a challenge for us in the upcoming year. Contractual is pretty flat, but theirs is mostly related to vehicles again, and then direct charges. And Councilor Pell, did you have a question? Okay, sorry. And collections is almost exclusively a personnel-driven program. You can see that contractual does take up about 24%, largely related to their vehicle expenditures. But the rest of that is men and women in the field doing the work, which is awesome. And we kind of talked about that. So this is another one where the vehicles have changed, and so our depreciation accounts have increased, or the charges are. This also is getting a new CCTV van this year. The existing one failed. Literally, the camera was failed. The company could not repair it again, and we came to council, and we have replaced that ahead of schedule. We have received that van now, and it is being placed into service. It's pretty amazing technology. The other thing that we did this year is we have now standardized our CCTV camera software. So both of our vans are using the same programs. That is now uploaded to a cloud interface. So when we come out and inspect sewer lines in front of your house, we're able to email you a link, and you can go look at the sewer line in front of your house if you're so inclined. So we're not getting a lot of hits on those videos, I just want to tell you.
You could have a neighborhood pub. Yeah.
Looking at our wastewater treatment budget, we are holding pretty flat, 24,000 increase in personnel. Again, just people are staying and moving up through their steps. Gary did a great job with his, materials and supplies, contractual and professional services. We had a big increase in our lab testing budget. So we're getting ready at the wastewater treatment plant for an update in our NPDES permit. NPDES is National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, and it is what regulates the wastewater treatment plant and its discharges to the Rogue River. We have been administratively extended now for probably 10, 12 years. Our permit has been expired that long. And when our next permit is written, it's gonna take a big jump forward. That means tighter restrictions. What we are doing this next year and a half is we are embarking on a fairly extensive data collection program so that when DEQ comes back to regulate us for something that's being found in the rivers up north, we're able to show them that that doesn't exist here and it's not in our wastewater stream, therefore don't write it into our permit. It's really important that we get ahead of that. We're working with Carollo Engineers, Inc., who this is what they do for a living. It is very important to spend those extra dollars to save us money, and we could be treating for something that really isn't an issue, but it costs us a lot of money to get out of the wastewater. So it's really important. And this one, again, slight personnel, mostly largely contractual and professional services. And this again is chemicals and power. We use a lot of power at the wastewater plant. Okay, and we've already talked about those as we went through. So debt service. Debt service is holding steady. This one, as you look at that date down there, we're not going to pay it off for a few more years. So this debt was undertaken in the last couple years for the major upgrade that we just did, which added a new aeration basin, redid the entire electrical system. There's still quite a bit of work to do there, but we're going to try and keep most of that work in self-funded segments. But we are currently paying close to $1.2 million per year in '24 and 1.7 this year. One of those is interest only right now, and it's going to kick into principal here shortly. I was wondering why the difference in my head, so now I'm questioning the number that I wrote in my chart, but I'm pretty sure it's right. And it might be that one of them are just because we're shifting more from interest to paying off principal. But those will be paying off in 2038, so we've got a couple years worth of debt service. Yes, sir.
Tom?
Jason, are you anticipating the 18% from urban renewal in this regard?
So we are. We are not reflecting it in any of the budget yet, and I believe when our initial conversations were, Adam, is that we would start showing that in the 2024 fiscal year budget. That part of the Urban Renewal Agency's project list included paying the debt service for both of these. Again, those paying 18% of this will greatly help the wastewater program be able to do more capital work. That's really kind of the trade-off there. So I believe we're going to start showing that in the fiscal '24 budget. Okay. So water restoration plant structural repairs, this is again performing minor structural repairs necessary for the proper operation of the water restoration plant. It is a fund that we have drawn down. We are recommending an additional $75,000. It pays for projects like when we redo the mechanism in one of our clarifiers, we'll be able to pay for that out of this fund when the main superstructure has failed. And we're able to do that with small contracts as opposed to a much, much larger project. Okay. Project SE 6200, this is on page 84 of your capital book. It is the Spalding Industrial Park wastewater infrastructure upgrade. I think we're on version G of our plan out there. This is such a difficult area to serve with sewer. It is flat We've gone uphill and we've gone back downhill, and we've got a creek running through the middle of it. It just is going to be a challenge. We actually have come up with another really pretty innovative plan that DEQ will approve this time. The last plan was great, but wouldn't be approved. We are asking for an additional funding allocation of $150,000. Total project cost is $870 here, but I think looking at the plan I saw today, it'll probably be a little higher than that.
Rick has a question.
Yep.
So Jason, force mains are expensive, aren't they? And
Yeah.
the pumps that are put in there wear out, what, 10, 15 years? So it's not a cheap or inexpensive piece of equipment. Is that true?
It is. And so are you talking about 6200 or the previous project?
6200.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really been kind of vexing us with this project is we're trying to get as much of it to flow by gravity as we can so that we can minimize the amount of wastewater that we're pumping just for that reason, Counselor. Pump stations are expensive to install, they're expensive to operate, and you're doing maintenance forever, and if they fail, you have wastewater overflows. So we actually have come up with a pretty innovative gravity solution that breaks it into a couple of different zones, and the amount that we're going to have to pump is going to be very, very insignificant.
Thank you.
Josh?
What's the timeline for the completion of this?
Yeah, we want to get out there and get the sewer in pretty quick. We can serve water to everything, I think, up to the creek. You know, once we get past the creek, things get a lot challenging for water. But we've got some businesses that I think are ready to go if we can get sewer to them. And right now, sewer is the big challenge. It is about 20 linear feet from popping up out of the ground if we keep running it. So we've got to get out there and reconfigure some stuff and get a few new pipes installed. And again, we've been struggling with the plan. We were looking at very small pump systems so that if you put in a business, you would just pump. Unfortunately, the plan that we came up with would mean every business would put in a pump, would also have to have their own individual line in the right of way, and that was not going to function. We were trying to do a combined pump system, but as soon as it became combined, we had to take ownership of everybody's system, and we did not want to be there. So they went back, came out, did a bunch of surveying. We found that we could have a gravity solution for everything pretty much south or west of the creek, which is amazing. So we're going to work on that. Yep.
Welcome, Brian.
Thanks. Late again. So when we've been talking about the Spalding area, we've been talking about funding some of those upgrades out there with urban renewal, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think, as I remember it, the discussion has revolved around the city paying like a quarter and the private investment paying the remaining. Is that applicable to this project?
So we would love to have the private dollars. Urban Renewal, I believe, is funding 25% of the project. I'm trying to get to that page, Counselor. Oops.
Yeah, that's what it's slated to do, is 25%.
Thank you. Yeah, it is slated to get 25%. I don't show it on my slide because those funds have already been allocated to the project. So these are just the new funds that we're adding here, or they've been designated for that project. Am I getting that incorrect? Wade just gave me a funny look.
I think that the urban renewal, there's two projects in the budget. One's an LB project, 6236, I think.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the one that's got urban renewal allocated to it, not the one that we're doing for wastewater.
So it is eligible. And we're still
Never mind, I was wrong. It's the other way.
Okay, I was gonna say, I thought this one had urban renewal dollars in it. Whew. Sorry, we're having a conference here on the sidebar. So the bottom line though, we're gonna have to leverage some of our dollars to be able to get them in there. Ultimately, we would look at potentially advanced financing and assessing those later. But if we can also just get these in there at a much, much lower cost, there may be lower costs for the businesses as well.
Okay, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but so there is not going to be that 75% portion that private industry is going to be backfilling for the city?
So urban renewal dollars were always designated to pay 25%. We can, absolutely, we can back charge, like I said, we can advance finance all of this infrastructure so that when a business builds and they connect, we can charge them back all of those additional funds, but we have to front load that cost. Does that make sense? So we have to go in there and build it, and then we'll build an advanced finance district that when they connect, they have to pay that infrastructure cost back. Council could choose then that maybe it's not 75, maybe they only pay 50 and we pay 25 or some other percentage, but that would probably be the mechanism that would get used.
Okay, and that's not the mechanism that we're currently operating under?
Well, when we go to do the project, right now we don't have enough engineering, we don't have enough. Right now we have to go in and pay for the whole project up front anyway, to get it installed in the ground.
So council can decide later what to do with that?
Well, we would have to form the AFD at the time of the infrastructure going in the ground. We would form that AFD in conjunction with all of the property owners around there, because there's some noticing requirements and legal requirements. We're putting me out of my comfort zone because this is not what I normally do, but I know that there's quite a few legal hoops that we have to jump through to form the AFD. So we would do that before we build the infrastructure, but council would then weigh in on what that assessment would actually be at that time.
Okay, and I assume that we'll have the opportunity to do that before that happens?
Yes, that is going to take some time, and
Yeah.
Jason is correct. You actually form the Advanced Finance District area first
Yep.
before you even know what the true cost of the project is, but you have the methodology established, and council will have that all figured out.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. This is another project where we have been drawing those funds down. This is to maintain all of the major pieces of equipment at the wastewater plant and pump stations. A pump at the water restoration plant is about $80,000, not something that we can just pull out of our O&M budget if one were to fail. We're recommending an additional funding, $50,000 of wastewater capital, so that should a major piece of equipment fail and need to be replaced, we have those funds set aside. Go ahead. This is project SC 6374. This is the Redwood area pump station and river crossing. This is a project we've been talking about for a couple of years. We have multiple crossing locations identified. We did look at multiple potential pedestrian bridge options. None of those really seem to pencil out. So likely this will fund continued study of that, but most likely it will just start the design on I was going to call it a bore, but it's technically a micro tunneling project, which would tunnel under the Rogue River and install a new sewer main across the Rogue River.
Can you do this with the fourth bridge and marry it up?
So, great question. The short answer is the fourth bridge is likely far too far upstream. We've got problems with the diameter of the two force mains, and so the issue is we need to intercept them a little bit farther, get them back across the river, and then back to the wastewater plant. So we're just needing a second crossing. We will still evaluate that, but likely it needs to be moved closer back to Darnielle, towards Darnielle Pump Station.
Brian?
Yeah, I know that you guys have looked at the pedestrian bridge option, and I don't recall the rough cost difference between doing it this way and doing it that way. Could you just throw to the nearest million or two?
I was going to say I thought it was 2 to 3 million, because the locations where the pedestrian bridges needed to go, the river got super wide, and to be up out of the floodway, I can get a firmer answer for everybody. There's a tech memo in my email that I can. It was quite a bit more.
Yeah, if you could share that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Scribbling notes. I should just tell Wade to take it. Oh. Boy, that jumped. SC 6375, this is our collection system maintenance program. Capital page 90, it does the same thing as our emergency storm drain program does, except on the sewer line side, where we set aside money. This one though we do a lot of emergency sewer line work. There's quite a few deteriorated lines, and this project is used for replacing badly deteriorated sewer mains and manholes. We are asking for an additional $700,000 in wastewater capital. Estimated total project cost is about $3.3 million, but again, this is one of those projects that goes year to year with almost unlimited number of sewer line projects that we can put into there. Okay. Project SC 6405, this is the water restoration replacement heat exchanger. This project was awarded by council, and it is replacing a badly deteriorated and poorly functioning heat exchanger in the digester. We are recommending an additional funding allocation of $150,000 in wastewater capital. Total project cost for this portion of the job, there's one more slide that has the second half of this job, which is also needing additional funding, is $1.25 million. And this one will actually convert the heat exchanger from burning natural gas to actually burning digester gas, which will save us quite a bit of money.
Tom?
That's just what I wanted to ask. Do you expect that you will not need to buy any additional gas, or will it not quite be enough?
It's going to be really close. We think we're going to have to supplement, and if there's not enough digester gas, it will just automatically feed more natural gas. But we're going to really, really greatly reduce the amount of natural gas that we produce, which we're running entirely on natural gas now. Gary's natural gas bill is pretty high. So.
Go ahead.
And then this is the second portion of that. This is project SC 6416. So in order to replace the heat exchanger, we have to take the entire digester down. The digester is the belly of the plant, literally. It does exactly what your stomach does. It takes in all the food and it digests it. It chews it up, essentially it causes a chemical reaction. We're fostering bugs in there that are eating up certain biological elements, and they are the ones that are excreting the methane that we're able to burn. However, when we take that down, this is our only opportunity to get in there and actually clean and inspect and make any repairs to the digester. So we're taking on this project at the same time. We are asking for an additional funding allocation of $700,000. The digester is going to need a redundant digester at some point in the future. This is the only digester we have. So again, while we've got it down, we need to take advantage of it. This pays for the cleaning, inspection, and any light refurbishment that needs to be done internally to that. This also was awarded by council a couple weeks ago. The work is in progress. Not in progress, but it will be in progress.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a new project. This is SC 6423, and this is the water restoration plant UV disinfection replacement. So we are asking for an initial funding of $200,000 in wastewater capital. We are just predicting that the initial project cost will be $200,000. What we are looking to do is do an initial retrofit of the existing spare UV system. So we have two UV banks. When we have high flows, we need both. The old system was put in the late 90s, early 2000s. It is hard to get parts for. Trojan will no longer service the unit. We think that it can be retrofit to run fully in manual mode, which will extend its life by possibly another 10 years. We believe it's a good value. We're going to be bringing a task order forward for consideration, which will look at that work. We'll be taking pieces and parts off of it, taking them to the lab and making sure that we can make it all work. If it does, we are going to proceed with that retrofit because we believe it is a very good value. A brand new UV system is probably going to be $2 to $3 million to install. So the $200,000 is a good investment, especially if we can get another 10 years worth of service.
Go ahead.
Okay. Next new project, this is SC 6424, and it is our sewer lateral replacement program. This is a program that council authorized a while back. The city does not own sewer laterals. They are owned by the resident, by the homeowner or the commercial property. We have similar programs for hazard tree replacement, sidewalk repair. This funds our 50-50 program. If a homeowner is having a sewer that is letting in dramatic amounts of water into our system, it is a detriment to our system. So we are benefited by helping that homeowner to replace that leaky sewer line. In addition, when they have major failures, oftentimes that manifests itself by dumping sewage onto their property, which ends up onto the street or running over other people's property, which it also benefits the city to get that corrected. So we are asking for an initial funding of $75,000 so that we are able to help fund that. This is a 50-50 program. It does leverage the homeowner's dollars, leverages the city dollars, makes our system much tighter, and helps out quite a bit.
Go ahead.
Just purely out of curiosity, do you guys have a lot of projects that you think could benefit from this immediately, or?
I know of one right off the top of my head that needs immediate attention, and hopefully that's proceeding forward. You know, we get these a couple a year, to be real honest. There's a lot of them out there. Not all of them are always apparent. There was one out in the Redwood system that we worked with the homeowner that when it rained, it actually ran, 4-inch diameter pipe, and it ran full, like full of water, and all of that water is coming into our system. And so those are the ones that we really are out there targeting. It does benefit us because all of that water into the system, we have to pump it and treat it and discharge it to the Rogue River, which costs us a tremendous amount of money. It's a good investment of funds.
Other questions? You're on.
Sorry, I was moving on. I'm headed to solid waste. Okay. So solid waste, back into the big book. This is pages 232 to 241. I'm like, man, somebody's, what is that? Field operations and landfill post-closure. So we don't actually have a solid waste program, but these funds are dollars that are used to maintain the Merlin landfill for the most part. There are some pass-through dollars that come in to help operate the Josephine County City of Grants Pass Solid Waste Agency. There is a little bit of limited franchise management, mostly handled through the Solid Waste Agency, but mostly it is post-closure monitoring of the Merlin landfill. It pays for the sampling and reporting of the landfill leachate. It pays for the maintenance of the cover and the surrounding properties and any other actions ordered by the Oregon DEQ. This fund also pays for water for a lot of customers in the Merlin area that were in the contaminated plume from the landfill. And it funds 0.05, I know that that's a tiny percentage, but it funds 0.05 of the urban forester to help us manage the 425 acres that are owned in this, on the landfill property itself. So this is a budget that doesn't change a lot year to year, and the change here is actually an increase in the beginning balance. As we finished up a couple of capital projects, we were able to reclaim some of those dollars, and so we're able to hold those for future projects. Insurance has actually gone up a fair amount. We maintain an insurance policy, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like an excess liability policy that covers us should new contamination be found. We debated pretty hard this time whether or not we should get it for the next couple of years, but we went ahead and went with another 5-year cycle. We're going to reevaluate at the end of that 5-year cycle because it is very expensive, but it probably pales in comparison to the cost that should something finally come up, and closed landfills are always a mystery. It could just be that there's a container right there waiting to rust through on us, but we don't think so. But pretty stable budget here. Field operations, this is where we get the work done. You can see that this is a very, very tiny budget. We have just a little bit of labor, which covers some mowing, some inspections on the gas flares, as well as just some direct charges for service. Almost no change in the budget. Looking at the post-closure operational, Again, this budget has changed a little bit, but I'm going to get into that. Most of it is contingency, which is kind of your ending fund. So we've increased that, which is great. But we also have increased costs. So as we look at our contractual and professional services, our contract with our landscape, he's a hydrogeologist, right? He's got a funny title, but that has increased a little bit, and we've done some additional testing. But he has more than paid for himself. In the last 2 years, we've been able to, with his assistance, all the leachate that we previously were trucking back to the water restoration to be treated as part of the wastewater plant has now running through a new bioswale that's been constructed. So we are now able to discharge that for free instead of paying for that service. He's also been able to get our air quality permit eliminated, which is amazing. That almost never happens, but our air quality, our discharges of methane from the landfill have become so low that we were able to get that permit eliminated. So Eric Tuppen and his team have more than earned the money that we have paid them, and they are now responsible for doing all of our testing and reporting to DEQ. Very worthwhile contract. Yeah, I don't think, even Eric had commented that he has never seen an air quality permit get eliminated, and when they decided that they would eliminate it, we jumped on that. That's pretty neat. So solid waste has some great efficiencies. We share staff. Gary and his team at the water restoration plant take care of the bulk of the heavy lifting. Craig and his team at water distribution take care of some of the well work, but the bulk of that is handled through contract. And then the urban forester helps us with maintaining that forest stewardship program. With 400 and some odd acres, you can imagine that that's quite a chore to keep it thinned and fire ready. That's not the right words I want at all. Not ready to burn. To keep it in a condition where it will not catch on fire. So landfill remediation, this is project LA2640. And this basically funds all of the activities required to mitigate the groundwater contamination. It gets an additional funding from solid waste capital. And these are funds that just kind of get passed through the budget. And I'm into the capital book on page 101. Tom?
Jason, is there any monitoring or reporting related to the old Foothill landfill?
So not the Foothill landfill, yeah, at all. And Scoville also, that is another one that's not, or not Scoville, help me out, the one out there, it is Scoville. Yeah, Foothill, Scoville, yeah, Foothill, no, there is not. The only ones that are required is Merlin. So we would like to keep it that way.
However, that land can't be sold or used in any other way?
That is my understanding. I don't know if it's deed restricted or not. We'd have to look into that, but it is my understanding that we're going to have to hold on to that.
Go ahead.
Okay. And that's it. Solid waste is our smallest program.
Any questions?
Let's move on to our support services. This includes our Public Works Administration, engineering services, facility management, garage operations, and equipment replacement. And we're up to 95, so we're flying now. So new, Public Works Administration was new in FY20. As the department continued to evolve, my time and Wade's time was spread across multiple budgets, and it was getting very complicated and hard to track. And when you look at some of the old allocations, it still shows up where you see distributions out 4 or 5 programs deep or 6 programs deep. We consolidated that by creating the Public Works Administration budget, and then we direct bill to the departments, which simplified how all of those charges were shown. The Public Works Administration budget pays for myself, Wade, the Business Operations Supervisor, our Department Support Tech, and our GIS program. Our beginning balance is stable. We have direct charges, which also are stable because our expenses don't change very much. Indirect charges, and this is a big change in this year's budget, and I want to explain that. You can see that we went from 0 to 127,000, but GIS fees went from 121,000 to 2,500. We actually are changing the way that GIS program is funded. sort of. It's still funded from our capital projects, but what we are doing now is when that money is transferred is when GIS is being paid. So GIS gets 1%, I'm just gonna use that as a number, some of it's 0.5%, but when those funds are expended is when GIS would receive its funds. So Wade tells me, we're gonna build 10 projects this year and for this many dollars, and I would say, okay, that means that GIS is gonna receive $100,000. Well, Wade only builds 3 of those projects because some other stuff came up and we just weren't able to get materials. Suddenly, GIS didn't earn the revenue that they thought they were going to earn, and I don't have enough money to pay my employees, and we're drawing down our fund balance because we funded it based on the expenses, not on the transfers. So what we're doing now is when we transfer those dollars into capital, which we know that they're going to get spent at some point, we're going ahead and taking that 1% out then and putting it into the GIS department. It actually will work out as a much more stable funding source, and it won't be so volatile where one year Wade's gonna way overproduce and he's gonna build way more than the 10 projects that he told me he was going to, so I reap all the benefits, but the next year he underdoes it and then I don't have any revenue. So this is just a way of stabilizing those funds. I can see the question coming. Yes?
Tripp?
So are there transfers into the GIS from any other funds than your capital projects?
So we have some direct charges as well. So we direct charge all of the departments who directly benefit from it, but a large portion of their funding actually comes from the capital program because that's what's generating their work, right? New pipes in the ground, they have to go in and update all of that data. So looking at the Public Works Administration budget, we held this budget very flat. We can see that our transfers were down. We're helping to fund some of the LB projects that you heard about. And then our contingencies drew down a little bit, but we're still well within fund balance policies. Everything else is pretty flat. And we already talked about that. We did lower our transfers, but Public Works is helping to fund the capital project that you heard about on the opening night, which is the City Yard Needs Assessment. And this again is a personnel heavy program, so 53% of the budget is really contained within that personnel services. And on to engineering. Pages 267 to 270. These are the men and women that are out there getting all those. Yep.
Sorry,
Sorry,
I just wanted
go
to
ahead.
go back here real quick.
Sorry.
So you took out $40,000 from the contingencies.
Yeah.
Is that mostly because of personnel increases?
No, what we did is we just had less money remaining to go into the contingency. So we didn't actually take it out. That contingency is really the ending fund balance. And so our revenues and expenses just equaled $40,000 less that year, but we were still within that. I think we're in the 25 to 35 fund balance policy, so we're still pretty good. Yep.
On to engineering.
On to engineering. And I swear I took that chart out this morning. I'm going to ask you to ignore the data in this chart because the data, we have new people in engineering and the data that they were able to pull is different than the data that the previous people were able to pull. And so when I get that, I don't trust the data and I wanted to delete it, but here it is again, I apologize. Bottom line, engineering is funded through fees for service, so a combination of fees for service, direct and indirect charges. So we receive money from developers for inspecting their projects, small amount. We also receive money from, say, water, if the engineering department is building a water project, or we receive money from parks for running their projects and inspecting their projects. So we direct bill just like any engineering firm would. In addition, we direct bill for service. We have a total recommended FTE count of 8, which is down slightly, and that includes surveyor, the engineering tech, which is assigned to data collection and GIS updating, and the city engineer, which is served by contract. Yep.
Go ahead.
So can you explain, if I'm a developer paying the engineering department, where's the line where, like, the building department we talked to on Tuesday, the work they're doing wouldn't be covered under engineering? Like, where's that line drawn?
Almost always at the right-of-way line. Almost always. There's a little bit of, like meter boxes, but pretty much we stop at the right-of-way.
So if the project I have involves changing right of ways, putting streets in, all that kind of stuff?
Even if it's not, if you're just doing like an infill project and you're running a new sewer lateral, we're gonna come out and inspect the sewer lateral. Water meter, similar, sidewalk.
And then also grading permits, so as you're doing your site grading, before you start building a house, we would do that to cover the erosion control.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay. So engineering division is down slightly when we look at our revenues, but this is based on how much work we're predicting that we're going to get. And it is a challenge to do that year to year. And what we do again is look at the projects that we think we're going to put out, kind of look at where the developer projects have been going. We tend to underestimate the amount that we're going to get from the developer side because that's definitely safer because that market can tank tomorrow. And then just look at how many capital projects the city will put out. All in all, it's still pretty stable, even though it is $70,000 lower, but it keeps the division operational and within fund balance policy. And then when we looked at where they're allocated, that also is down, although that last number should be red and not black. But personnel is pretty flat, up slightly. We've had a little bit of staff turnover, so we have staff that are at their bottom steps, so that kind of reduces our personnel overhead. Our contractual is pretty flat as well. That pays for like our city engineer contract. And in general, this budget is pretty well flat. Similar to all of our support services, they're personnel heavy. It really is a personnel driven operation. With contractual being filled out by a city engineer and some other contracts, a little bit of contingency, and then materials. Facilities. This is one of our fastest changing groups. This has been pretty amazing to watch. Personnel have turned over. We've gotten some new personnel in. They have a little bit different philosophy on how the division operates. We are finalizing a pretty large capital project, which is a complete condition assessment of all the facilities, which we'll be bringing to council in the next couple months. And we're continuing to implement the PAVE recommendation, which is really a refocus on the mission of this department, which is looking more at proactive facility maintenance as opposed to being fairly reactive and then doing mostly room setups and helping out with the downtown core duties. It really has been a great change. We have total recommended FTEs in this budget of 4, which does recommend, which is a increase of 1 over the previous budget, if you would consider that. The PAVE report did recommend 2 additional FTEs. We believe with the addition of 1, we can then look at taking on additional facilities or additional services and provide a much higher level of service. And you can probably tell by looking around the building, the group has been doing some pretty amazing stuff, but we still have a long way to go just with this facility, let alone some of the city yard facilities, some of the parks facilities. All of those do need some significant work. So looking at what that means to the budget, the additional FTE, personnel services does show a dramatic increase. Now, some of this is staff moving up through their steps. Some of this is staff that were allocated here and working in the downtown. Are those charges coming back into this budget? But most of it is the addition of that 1 FTE in addition to the partial FTEs that were allocated elsewhere. Our contractual services we've held flat, but overall the budget would be up by $85,000 to add this additional FTE.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. So on page 273, it outlines the financial summary of this. And I guess my question is how are we paying for that additional FTE?
How are we paying for it?
Yeah, where's the money coming from to?
So the entire division is supported by billing other departments. So we will, I believe this year, our costs remained flat, but we'll have to look at either more square footage, possibly taking on other buildings and other divisions where they're possibly not being taken care of by the facilities group, or look at changing our rates to what that we do charge to the departments we serve.
Okay. Does it have any relation to, I'm seeing the beginning balance this year to next year going down by 50%.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how we're going to start paying for it and then figure out the rest later?
Well, so right now, no. Our intent would be to raise the rates or add square footage. It's going to be one of those two. We'll need to talk with, we're not serving public safety. We're not police and fire. Sorry. I've worked here far too long. That change is going to get me forever. Those are a couple of options. They have people there that are doing those jobs and they're doing them well. We might be able to provide them a higher level or a modified service that would benefit them, such as maybe just doing HVAC and some of the other higher functioning system maintenance type things. The other thing we'll look at is just our rate structure here and whether or not we need to change our rates to those at the city yard, for example, or here to serve that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tripp?
Does changing an internal rate structure require council action akin to what like changing utility rates might be?
It has not traditionally. It's something that we look at internally and we just balance that. We also look continuously, and we'll talk about it more when we get to like garage operations. We compare ourselves to our outside comparators all the time to make sure that we're competitive or we're providing a higher level of service for that additional fee. So this is one where we are pretty personnel heavy. 43% of the budget is represented by personnel. And then the rest is contractual. So in that contractual line, that's all of the utilities for all of the buildings. So power, natural gas. It is also paying for contracts for mowing. We contracted out a lot of the services that we were previously doing with our own staff. The reason is we were able to sell off some of our equipment, which we're paying to purchase, maintain, and operate, and then it frees up those staff to do much more technical work here in the buildings. It's really another good trade-off where I can hire somebody with a field mower to go out and mow blank fields at a much lower rate than I can pay for and maintain and operate equipment. So we'll continually look at those types of items. And I just wanted to show, because that is such a large part, janitorial, security and alarm services, plumbers, electricians, HVAC maintenance, elevator services, tree contractors, building, fencing, and grounds repairs. Those are kind of some of the examples of our contractual service lines. So this program definitely continues to evolve. Guy Canova, who is our facilities superintendent, has done an incredible job of really refocusing the division and being much more proactive with our maintenance and identifying projects that need to be done. We're really excited to bring forward the facility condition assessment to the group to really show the council where we're at, where we need to get to. And Guy has already been ticking off a lot of those boxes even before we got those reports, and it was actually pretty great to see. This additional staff member definitely is a benefit, and it is important to note that it is replacing a temporary labor person. So we have kept a temporary person on board almost full-time since I have been up here at City Hall, so 5 years. We are replacing that, and we have removed those dollars from the budget, which also helps with that offset, in the position that we're recommending be added. And I think that that's it for facilities. I want to pause there and take any questions that you have, because this is the one that does have the big change because we're adding a body.
Gordon?
You talk about a city engineer being contracted. Is that a person or a firm?
It is a firm, but it is a small firm, so maybe 2 to 3 people at a time. It is Thornton Engineering, and they've actually provided the city with some pretty good service over the years at a very cost-effective rate.
Josh?
Just looking at the list of the contractors that you're going out for, plumbers, electricians, HVACs, tree service, these are becoming, I'm like, can I find out where you're getting these folks? Because I can't hire any of these people right now.
I'll have I'll have Guy reach out to you.
Yeah, but probably those services are going to be going up higher than we even expected. Have you built in some contingency for that? I see a little bit of a contingency fund.
We
but
do,
that could
and
go quick.
unfortunately, we had actually hired somebody that was a licensed electrician, which was able to do all of that work, and that person left. So that was my contingency, but this budget had already been presented and locked in. You know, we manage. What we do is we take on what we can, we contract out what we can, we shift jobs where we can. We'll make it work. But you're right, we're seeing all of these contractors be in much higher demand. The other thing we've been doing is being more proactive with getting quotes from farther away. What we've found is that the local community is at saturation, but yet somebody in Medford may have more capacity to come over and do that job, or maybe even Roseburg. And so we've been finding competitive pricing and people traveling, which didn't used to happen. So garage operations, this is in page 278 to 283 of your budget book. And this program is responsible for all of the vehicle procurement, maintenance, and disposal. They have a total recommended FTE count of 4, and they are 4 great folks. We have an amazing mechanic team right now, and Dave and Alicio. It's just pretty incredible. So the budget is up overall, but there are reasons for that. Again, personnel services is up, but that's our employees have been now with us for quite some time, and as they move up through their steps, they do increase in salary. Materials and supplies, we have increased quite a bit. I'm actually thinking that we may have underguesstimated this one, to be quite honest, but we again had those numbers locked in. And now we're seeing gas prices spiral. We will actually be coming to you to do a revision to this year's budget as we under budgeted on fuel. And if this is going to sustain, we may end up looking at a revision next year in this line. We do have room within the budget itself to absorb this within the contingency, so I'm not super worried today. Because again, tomorrow gas prices could start to go down, not that they will, but they could. And we don't want to show too large of a swing. But we did increase it pretty dramatically in this year's budget to account, in the FY23 budget to account for that. Otherwise, everything is pretty flat within that budget. There is a transfer out, which is up $25,000. Again, that is for fleet to help contribute to the study at the city yard. And as we saw on the tour, there was actually a fire truck parked right in front of the door, and it can't drive in because the doors are too low. So. Counselor.
Brian?
Yeah, just to clarify on the materials and supplies line, it looks like it's about a 24% increase, and you think that estimate is low, that it's actually going to be higher than 24%?
I do.
Okay.
When we come before you, I don't have the numbers in the top of my head. I wish I'd have actually written them down. Fuel prices, when these budgets were created, were $2, $3, and now we're pushing $5 a gallon, and we're burning thousands of gallons of fuel per month. It is a big hit to the budget. So we are actually coming forward to make a revision to move money from contingency into the current year budget, but that's being taken under a separate action.
Okay, so essentially the entire increase is fuel? I mean, aside from a couple little things?
Parts, yeah, a little increase in parts, but the majority of that is all in the fuel line.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Again, personnel, materials and supplies, it's pretty equal. And we talked about all of those. So some of the challenges, and I want to speak to this because this is really, really important to keeping a viable shop. Keeping skilled workers. Without skilled mechanics, it does not make sense to operate a shop. And again, I can't say this enough. We have 2 of the most skilled staff that we have had in my history with the city. It's actually pretty amazing. Our rate structure, we need to continually monitor this. We talk about comparing ourselves to the outside world. We are more expensive than going to Joe's fleet shop. However, we're open 24/7. You can roll up to the fleet shop and Alicio and the team will take care of your issue at a moment's notice, whereas you're going to need an appointment to go to any other shop. So we offer a much higher level of service for that increased fee. So it is definitely worth it to our customers, I think. And again, while we have this team, it definitely pays off. It is a challenge to budget for, though. And the reason is our revenues are generated 18 months ago. So the way that the fleet structure is, we try to even out our payments. So we do work over the calendar year, and in December I close the books and I look back and then I say, okay, Warren, you spent $200,000 in fleet maintenance. I then get paid back for that work that I did 18 months ago in the next fiscal year. So starting in July, I start collecting that money back. So it is hard to balance. So if I spent a lot of parts in the previous 12 months, I don't get that money back for another 18 months. So it is a challenge, but it's one that we kind of overcome. So the next big part of that is equipment replacement. So this is really where our vehicle, oops, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You're headed to where I was headed.
Sorry, Joe.
Go ahead, you're fine.
Yes.
Why is there such a lag, an 18-month lag in that cost?
So years
recoupment?
ago, what we used to do is you'd roll in and it would be just like going to the corner garage. You would roll in, you'd get service, and we'd send you a bill and you'd pay it in that year. Well, what happens is when you have a lot of services in a year and you didn't really plan for it, you end up spending $200,000, but you only budgeted $100,000. The next year you say, okay, I've got this covered. I budgeted $200,000, but you only spent $100,000. So it was determined, well, let's look at the previous year and then pay that back a year later because we can equalize those payments. And so that's where that lag has come from. It just means that we might be expending more in one year and getting it back in another. It just creates a little bit of lag. Okay. Great. So equipment replacement, this is really where we bring in the funds. This is from the depreciation. Each vehicle, when we purchase it, we like to pay cash. And from day one, we start paying off the next one. So if that was a $100,000 vehicle and we think it's going to last 15 years, we take $100,000 and divide it by 15 years and start making payments every month. They also earn interest, which is allocated back to those individual vehicles. But it does hold on to quite a bit of cash because vehicles that we operate are very expensive. We are recommending a full budget of about $6.7 million with over $1.8 million in expenses. When we look at that capital outlay, that's that expense line.
Oh,
Rick
sorry,
has
Karen.
a question. Rick has a question.
So Jason, that capital outlay will include a new fire truck, is that true?
Great segue into my next slide, Councilor Riker. Yes, it does. Council will be asked to consider the purchase of a new fire truck. And I have FY22 and FY23 numbers. FY22, we said we were going to buy a new fire apparatus, and we kind of have pushed that off. We were waiting and hoping that we would have a new fire chief on board. That's not happening. So we do need to kind of get this process started because it can take up to 2 years to actually get a fire apparatus constructed. So, but you can see in the meantime, that price has gone up. We have been talking with our suppliers. We are looking at close to $800,000 for a fire apparatus. There is $880,000 in there. There is another fire apparatus that's wrapped into that dollar value, but it does include that. It also includes several police vehicles. You can see the list that we have recommended for FY23. And these are all direct replacements, not additions to the fleet.
So Jason, that was my question, was how often do you update those rates given the change in expenses?
Annually. So we relook at what the vehicles are going to cost. We update those numbers and adjust them every budget cycle, actually. We'll look at it and payments sometimes go up, sometimes they go down. Sometimes we'll look at a vehicle and go, you know what, this is lasting us way longer. Instead of replacing it at year 10, we're going to push it out to 15. And that person will see their vehicle numbers drop because by pushing it out, we've extended or lowered their payment.
Sure. I know other organizations also do the maintenance by looking at the average maintenance per vehicle type and make that a monthly fee as well.
Yep.
And I don't know if you want to consider that or not.
So Ari and I have had this discussion quite frequently because I would like to come up with a better method of doing that. That might be a great way to go.
Tom?
Jason, as I recall during the service level reduction discussions, there was a change in the vehicle replacement cycle from 5 to 7 years.
Yep.
Is that still in place?
Yeah, we did not, there were a couple vehicles, individual vehicles that we looked at and went 7 years isn't going to work. So we did adjust a few of those, and you saw that in corresponding increases in the program budgets, but they weren't across the board. But we did extend them, especially on some of the police cruisers. The Tahoes were looking like they were going to get much longer life than, say, the smaller cars. And some of the larger ones we extended out much farther.
Gordon?
Is there such a thing as a municipal buying service where you, Grants Pass, can pool with hundreds of other places to get a discount?
There is, and we buy the vast majority of our vehicles through several services that do just that. Orpin is one, which is the Oregon Procurement Information Network. There's a couple others where they pool those together, and also where they'll pool, like if you do a bid for a type of vehicle for a government agency, they allow that to be given to everybody else that is a member of that network.
Trip?
So what kind of control mechanism is in place for when we extend the useful life of an asset, making sure that's a reasonable assumption? And I think just like from my private sector experience, if you go messing with a depreciation schedule, your auditors are going to pay pretty close attention to that.
Yeah.
So what exactly is the check and balance there?
I don't know that we depreciate or have to report the vehicles in the same way. I'm going to look to JC for that.
So yeah, we do have to depreciate. A lot of times though, it's not a huge auditor ask because we have so many vehicles and so many schedules on there. Again, it can get complicated by moving some of those out, but we try and stay as standardized as possible. And then when we make those updates, try and basically straight line depreciate based on those schedules that they're giving us.
Yeah, I guess maybe depreciation wasn't the right. Oh, go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
Exactly. I think you were about to say what I was going to say. I think historically, this practice of setting aside funds for future replacement of those vehicles has been called depreciation.
Yeah.
And that might not be the best term for it. As far as the auditors are concerned, we're doing exactly what you're saying, which is depreciating those vehicles over their useful life, where this is just a replacement schedule. It is what Jason is describing.
Right, and yeah, I mean, that's what depreciation is an analogous term. I mean, really, it's a sinking fund, and I think the premise still holds, though, right? It's obviously convenient then when we run up against a potential levy that might or might not pass. We can create some room in the budget by extending the useful life of some assets, but is there like an admissible expert looking at those cars saying like, yeah, actually you were wrong about the 5-year cycle at the first place, and actually you can go to 7 just fine? Or is it just like, okay, cool, we make the assumption for budget cycle, but sometime in October the truth comes out?
Yeah, no, we rely on Ari and Dave, who are our two most experienced person at the fleet shop, to evaluate those vehicles and go, no, this vehicle is in good shape. It will last that extra 2 years. Because I'm with you, I don't want to do that. I would much rather replace it almost before it needs it, because for 2 reasons. One is it's not into breakdown mode. The other is you'll get a much higher resale value for it, which goes back into that vehicle replacement pool. So, but we do evaluate it very closely.
Josh?
You guys don't use these as like collateral for debt service or anything along those lines, do you? This is just all like, so even when we're talking about like liability, it's not really a liability or anything along those lines around our debt service at all, is it?
No, basically we're just trying to hold funds to make sure that we can replace it if it blows up.
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the non-specialized vehicles. So just, your regular consumer type vehicles. Just curious what kind of factors we look at when we're deciding what vehicles to get. I know obviously probably initial price is a big one. I'm wondering, is operations, cost per mile a consideration, maintenance costs, resale value, fuel costs, given what we just discussed?
Yeah, all of those things. Ari and his team really look at this. One of the things we've been looking at, we've leveraged the use of hybrids quite a bit through grant funding, and so now those are being phased out. Now we're replacing those. We have been replacing those with gas because the hybrids have kind of phased out, and we need the vehicles to go on extended trips a lot because we check out those pool vehicles. But we also look at what each role of the vehicle is, so we try to make sure that we can accommodate the role of the vehicle, what its travel time is, and all that other stuff is. I think what you're going to see in the next couple of years, Counselor, is we're going to be purchasing our first electric vehicles because we do have several vehicles that don't leave town. And they would probably be ideal in that role, which would lower our gas prices. We're really close to that. And so they evaluate it each time. We do try to keep very consistent with brands so that we're not having a Ford and a Hyundai and a Chevy. It just keeps it easier. We can stock less parts. We can, have less training because we're working on the same thing every time. But beyond that, it usually is cost, to be quite honest.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The cost per mile calculation can vary widely between vehicles. So I urge us to make sure we're taking a close look at that factor.
Yep.
Other questions?
So some of the challenges with equipment replacement, we talked about some of them, but I'm going to take a note of a couple. Public safety vehicles have become very expensive. Upfitting has gone up quite a bit. The police cars, but it allows him, Warren and his team, to be very efficient with one person in a car. They have a lot more tools at their disposal. But it does lead to a little bit more cost in upfitting those vehicles, so we have to make those choices. That's why extending them out actually makes sense, because we're not paying for upfitting so frequently. And a lot of that upfitting we're able to reuse between vehicle and vehicle. That's the other thing. We'll tear them down and reuse a lot of that equipment in between vehicles. Things that can't always translate are like racks inside or the cages, which might fit a 2008 Tahoe, but not a 2015 Tahoe. Those are the kind of things that we have to evaluate. Multiple vehicles are still internally leased. This is a more expensive option. What that means is a vehicle was not fully, the sinking fund had not been fully replenished. I'm going to try not to call it depreciation for the rest of this presentation. And so they had to borrow money from their internal funds to pay that back. We do try to recoup that so that they're paying almost double. We've about eliminated that practice, and we're almost caught up on that, which is great. And then the other biggie is right now, and you've seen it everywhere, vehicles are almost impossible to get. Sometimes when we're placing orders for them, they're 18 to 24 months out. So that's another challenge that we're going to face. We just ordered a new Vector truck, and we're told that we would see delivery of the chassis in February of 23. And we put that order in February of 22. That didn't count constructing the vehicle. That was just the chassis being delivered to the manufacturer. So going to be some challenges there. So that $1.8 million that we were seeing, or the in purchases, I would not bank on that getting spent in the next fiscal year. It's going to get carried over. So public works challenges. Replacement of the water treatment plant is our #1 challenge. We're going to be working on that day in and day out until that job is complete. The stormwater utility was issued its MS4 phase 2 permit. We're in year 3. Staff are still working with our stormwater consultants to really make sure that that process goes smoothly. We have a compliance plan now, and that's being worked. Deferred water, wastewater, and stormwater maintenance is going to be one of our biggest challenges over the next few years, but the teams are out there meeting that head on. It's really great to see. Council also has been very proactive in ensuring adequate funding for the operations, and the guys and the gals in the field really do thank you. The work that we've been able to accomplish is because of those rates that were put in place in the last couple years. But we as staff need to continue to look at that and make sure that we are balancing our utility costs with affordability, and make sure that people can still afford those services that we're providing, and that's very key. And in summary, all of the Public Works divisions continue to meet their regulatory requirements. Staff continue to do amazing jobs. I can't say enough about them. The Public Works Administration will continue to review our effectiveness and efficiency, balancing the services provided with our costs. And lastly, I just want to thank all of the men and women of the Public Works Department who make my job look easy, because I just sit up in the office. They're the ones that are out there getting all the work done. So with that, I will take any final questions.
Brian.
Thank you, Jason. That was a marathon presentation. Good job.
Thank you.
I just had one last follow-up question about vehicles. You mentioned that we're probably going to be replacing some of the hybrid vehicles with gas vehicles. And given the fuel costs going up, I'm just wondering what the rationale is there.
Well, right now it still is the most available fuel. We don't really have the infrastructure for the electric cars. The ones that we're replacing are the ones that are pool vehicles that are sent on very extended trips out of town. And, you know, we haven't really trained our staff on how to seek out all those electric charging stations and whatnot. I'm not quite sure that we're ready to go full electric or other fuel source at this point.
Sure, I think I was maybe more referring to why aren't we replacing it with another hybrid?
Yeah, so in the vehicle sizes that we're looking at, you're not seeing as many hybrids on the market. And that's what Ari is telling me. I'm not digging into that much. We can definitely investigate it more. But the full gas seem to be much more reliable. And that's just kind of where we've been at. But it's definitely something that we can take under consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Karen.
Rick has a question.
Who has
Jason,
one? Rick, okay.
Going back. Go ahead, Aaron.
No, you're up.
Okay. Jason, back at transportation on Hillcrest, does this county or the state participate in any of the costs of that upgrade?
Hey Rick, this is Wade. So the county is reconstructing 10th Street from Dewey Court up to Hillcrest, and in that they're putting stormwater, curb gutter, and sidewalks. That'll be part of their contribution, which would be kind of an in-kind contribution. ODOT, as they're doing the Oregon Seismic Bridge retrofits to the overpass over Hillcrest, are widening it and putting in the sidewalk underneath the interstate. So when we come in, we should lag about a year behind them, both of those projects, and then we'll just tie into what the county did in 10th Street, and we'll tie into what ODOT did under Hillcrest, and keep going through.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so at this time, if there's anyone in the public that wants to comment or ask questions, this is the time. Okay, is there anybody from the Budget Committee that has any general questions or informations or statements? I thought I had one too.
I have one item just as an update. Councilor Daley Grange had a question about the Redwood area pump station and river crossing and the cost difference between the bridges and stuff like that. And the numbers that I have are that, you know, the Schroeder Park to the city connection or the Lathrop Landing city connection would run around anywhere between $6.3 to $11 million, where if we did the alternative to a bridge, which would be a micro-tunneling or something, it'd be around maybe $2 million. So that's the number, if that sparks your memory, is about right. So maybe $5+ million difference between pedestrian type of bridge due to the length, like Jason said, due to the length and the issues with the river.
I could have swore the slide said like 5.5 million. Am I off base there? I don't have it, the slide, but when that was up, I thought it was 5.5.
That, you mean SE 6374? Yeah, it's, total estimated project cost 5 million, but it's still under evaluation.
And that's a lot of pipeline, both directions. So yeah, it might cost us $2 million to get under the river, but we still have $3 million worth of pipe to get it all the way back to the wastewater treatment plant. I mean, we're talking total project costs.
I see. Okay, thank you.
If
Say,
there's no
Tom, I
other
had just one
questions,
quick
or-
comment.
I'm sorry?
I
I'm
just
sorry.
want to express appreciation to the folks that have participated, because they were really good questions and articulate and represent a good experience, so thank you.
And you had good answers. Okay. Can I get a motion to vote for the tentative approval of the programs that were discussed?
I would like to move that the Budget Committee approve the recommended budget for the Public Works Department.
Okay, and I see a second by Josh. Okay, can we get a show of hands for, in favor of the, okay.
And ask online.
Okay, and you folks online?
Rick is yes.
Vanessa Auger, yes.
And Jason, are you there? Okay, yes from everyone that was able or did participate. Okay, and now could I get a motion to continue the hearing to Tuesday, the 17th? Okay, wait a minute, I'm sorry, Jason, don't mind me, Josh has something.
Sorry, I just wanted to thank Mr. Sandlin for reaching out to me after some of the questions that I had asked. My apologies, I didn't quite have all of the details put together, but him and we actually sat down. He was incredibly professional. I actually was able to kind of let him know like what some of the concerns that I had, and he was really proactive. And I just want to say thank you so much for him reaching out that way. And he is a real class act, so thank you.
Thank you. Could I try that again? Tom, you made the original motion, is that right, to continue the hearing to Tuesday? I think you did. Okay, I'm sorry, you did, Josh. I kind of got
No, he was.
Somebody make a motion.
I will move to continue the hearing to Tuesday,
the 17th.
The 17th.
And I will second.
Perfect. Now can I have a show of hands? Perfect. He got me when I was only partway through. That's what happened. Okay.
All right, good job.